Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
The morning speeches didn't stop for half an hour. People were coming to the coffin in an endless stream. They were dressed in black. They had flowers in their hands, and the snow continued to fall. Sleep well, dear friend. A young, long-haired boy was speaking inspirationally at the coffin. He was wrapped head to toe in a blanket cloak. Emma did not know him. And how could she know all of Aiden's countless friends? He had more of them every week. He was a gregarious man. Your memory, respect, and love will live forever in our hearts. We will never forget you, the speaker continued. She shook her head annoyingly. When would this speaker finish his speech? She looked up unhappily. I wondered when it would stop snowing. It had already fallen a year's worth of snow, and it just kept coming. The coffin was open, and snowflakes were falling on her pale face, and she wanted to go over and wipe them off. She couldn't shake the horrible thought that Aiden must be freezing. And this nameless fellow kept talking and talking. Who said it was warmer in the grave? Maybe it's better that way than down there in this frozen ground. Aiden's long-haired friend even managed to cover his face with his palms and sobbed silently. It seemed the speeches were over. The crowd slowly moved out of the way. The coffin had been lowered into the grave, and now people were coming up to take turns throwing handfuls of earth into it. Someone tugged insistently at Emma's sleeve, trying to take her hand. She didn't look back, pulled her arm out and walked forward. She came close to this grave, picked up the earth, but did not dare to throw it on the coffin. For some reason she imagined the sound of the dead earth falling, how it must have rattled as it hit the wood. And who came up with these rituals? All these people who come to funerals. Can't they come afterward to leave flowers on the grave, and on the day of the funeral give the loved ones a chance to say goodbye to the deceased in peace? Why the speeches? Mourning ribbons with the inscription eternal memory? Or this custom of throwing a handful of earth into the grave? Aiden loved silence. And now he lay in his coffin and couldn't shut his ears. He must listen to this earth and hail from beginning to end. Stop it! She pulled herself back. Stop it! You're going crazy now. How can he hear anything? She covered her eyes and forced herself to unclench her fingers. The earth, already in her hand, hit the coffin lid with a thud, and strangely enough, Emma felt better. At least her ability to think more or less soberly returned to her. She slowly opened her eyes and looked around, trying to figure out how to get out of the crowd without attracting too much attention. But she didn't succeed. An already familiar, but that didn't make it any more pleasant, voice called out to her. Emma. She felt another annoying hand on her sleeve. What on earth was this, after all? Who was so anxious to talk to her, and why now? Emma, look around, you're not deaf. She reluctantly turned at the voice. So what else? The man who now stood before her was about 3 times larger than herself, but it seemed to her that his knees were buckling, swaying him from side to side like a reed in the wind. Emma, well, that's pretty much it. Yes, that's really me. I see. Nice of you to come to the funeral. Goodbye. Emma, I'm sorry. Even though I deserve it, I deserve and understand it as well as you do. The man looked around, either trying to see if anyone was overhearing them or just avoiding eye contact. I'm so grateful to you for everything you've done for Eden. She cast a brief glance in the direction of the grave. There were still people crowded there. Yes, Aiden had a lot of buddies. This is what they're thanking me for. For his funeral, for the pit. She felt herself shrieking and silenced herself. I think I'm getting hysterical, Emma thought. Need to go home, have some hot tea with lemon, take a shower, lie down. He shook his head. His fingers were still gripping her sleeve, and Emma, not bothering to say anything, released his hand abruptly. Let me pass. It's not your fault, the man muttered slowly. Not your fault that it was impossible to save him. I don't know if he could have been saved at all. Go home, she advised, suddenly distinctly aware of his breath and alcoholic notes. You seem to be drunk. Unfortunately, no. I've been drinking all night, wanting to get drunk, but I've stayed sober. That's what it seems to you. I don't blame you. Maybe you feel better this way, but you're talking nonsense now, and I'm not in the mood to listen. I'm sorry. No, wait, he tried to catch her arm again, but missed. It's not like you abandoned him. Did everything for him that I should have done. But I didn't. There's no point in speculating about that now, Emma retorted. And there's no point in tormenting yourself for me. Go home. I don't know, calm down somehow, have another drink or lie down. Try to sleep. It's over. She walked around him, still muttering something, and moved toward the cemetery exit. No one else tried to stop her. It was cold at home. Some malfunction on the heating duct again. Such problems recurred 2 or even 3 times a month. Most of the tenants no longer relied on central heating and had bought space heaters. Emma had bought one for herself, but she had no energy left to turn it on. She went into the room without undressing and sat down on the sofa. After all, who would show up at her door? She could walk around the house in street shoes and a down jacket all the time. No one would say a word. The phone in her pocket sang softly, but she didn't care who was calling. She fumbled to disconnect the annoying receiver and lay back on the couch as she put on her winter boots. So, Aiden was dead. Of course, his brother had been right about something. After all, that's where things were headed. Emma had so urged him not to go on this last expedition. You've had a fever for a week, a cough. Can't they do without you? But Aiden, as usual, only laughed. That's because I haven't been in the mountains for a long time. I'll get some real fresh air. It'll go away. I'm the one who got sick from the city's gasiness. Here the whole Mendeley's table hangs in the air. Smog. What smog in the morning? How could I argue with him? All hunters are like that. She was angry that you're such a shift, at least with a broken leg, at least with a fever. But you have to go to the next wilderness and sit there, feeding mosquitoes. Aiden corrected her with the most serious look. Mosquitoes? No.
Don't worry about it. It's nothing.
It's nothing. But when he was brought back by helicopter, half dead, when the hospital diagnosed him with bilateral pneumonia, and advanced pneumonia at that, she wondered if there was nothing to worry about then either. Maybe, at least Aiden, wasn't worried about anything. He just hadn't regained consciousness. Ma dozed, and through her sleep she could hear someone's quiet footsteps around the apartment and the rustle of things being moved. Aiden's going out again, she thought without waking, on some stupid camping trip, and it's bad weather outside and the fridge is empty. Aiden was dead after all. The thought pulled her out of her slumber. Who was walking around the apartment then? She opened her eyes wide and sat up on the couch. Who's here? Sorry to startle you, Emma. Aiden's brother came out of the bathroom with a towel in hand. He wiped his wet hands thoroughly, right down to each finger individually. She finally remembered what his name was, Calrain. Yes, that's right, Calrain. Emma mumbled. That's my towel. Besides, I told you at the cemetery to go home. I did, he replied calmly. I'm sorry about the towel, but I couldn't find anything else. You can't walk around with wet hands. I came home. It's Aiden's apartment, right? The only place I can call home in this town, even if it's a bit of a stretch. How did you get in here? Emma suddenly realized she was still in her down jacket and shoes, and began unlacing her boots. I wasn't so sound asleep that I couldn't hear. The door was unlocked. He squatted down in front of her. Let me help you take your shoes off. You need to get some rest. Don't, she jumped to her feet, confused and angry. You'd better tell me exactly what you're doing here, or rather, why you're here and why you're acting like you're at home. Nothing could confuse Calrain. He gave Emma a gentle shove on the shoulder to make her sit up again, pulled off her shoe, and began unlacing the other. I told you, he said, not looking up and continuing to lace as if it were the most important thing in the world. You just don't want to hear me. I arrived yesterday and spent the night here. Well, let's skip the details. After the funeral, I came here to my dead brother's apartment. I don't have any other place in this town, and since Aiden is dead, his apartment will be inherited by me. He pulled off his other shoe and finally lifted his head, meeting her gaze. So I'm home, and rather I could ask you, what are you doing here? But I won't. Are you hungry? I stopped at the store on the way here. There's ZC. She rubbed her eyes. For some reason they were so dry it hurt to even blink. You must be hungry, even if you don't feel it right now. Take off your jacket and go wash your hands. I'll cook something. Don't forget your towel." He handed her his. Annie took the towel. It was unpleasantly damp, and for some reason it made her feel instantly better. She suddenly remembered that about 10 years ago, after her mom died, something strange had started happening to her. During the day, she somehow held on. Life itself helped her. She had to go to school, and immediately afterward she had to run to work, and then home in the evening for the notes. And it would be good to eat something for dinner. And no one would do this dinner but you. So the day started early, flew by quickly, and by nighttime the only thing I wanted to do was to fall asleep as soon as possible. Emma fell asleep as soon as her head touched the pillow and slept soundly until the alarm clock rang. At least that's what she thought. But the neighbors in the communal room told interesting stories. For example, that Emma disturbed their sleep because all night she wandered back and forth along the common corridor. She herself did not remember this and did not even believe the conversations, considering them just an unfortunate joke. Then, one night, a flash of bright light struck her in the eye. That's when she saw that she was standing in the corridor in a nightie barefoot and could not understand how she got here. However, the solution was simple. It was her neighbor and Ariana, who heard the familiar night footsteps, opened the door to her room, and turned on the light. Emma stared at her, blinking perplexedly. "So how did I end up here?" she whispered. And Ariana silently took her hand and led her back to her bed, covered her with a blanket and made her drink a sedative. Afterward, she wet a towel and laid it right in front of Emma's bed. "If you still get up after stepping on wet stuff, you'll wake up right away," she explained briefly. "You have that from grief. When I buried my husband, I lived like a dream for a month. The doctor at the polyclinic told me then what to do. Don't be afraid, it'll pass." A wet towel. It turns out to be a useful thing, Emma thought. And every single one of them. And it cleared her head immediately. It helped then, and it helps now. And she, awake with curiosity, looked at him.
"I've been calling you since Aiden went into the hospital," he said. "Sent messages, even voice messages. Have you read them at all? Listened?"
And read and listened to every single one. And not once did you call me back or come to me, even though I asked you to. "Why?" she asked. "Did you really want to know?" Calrain raised his eyebrows. "You won't like what you hear, will you? And yet I'm asking." "All right, since you're asking, I'll answer. I just didn't believe that Aiden was really in trouble. You may not know it, but he had this way of claiming he was in trouble. And you know why? Of course, he did it for a reason. But the goal was always the same, to get more money out of me. He thought that if I lived abroad, I had plenty of it. Not true." Emma shook her head. "Only I don't understand why you're lying. Aiden never asked you for anything. And how long have you known this guy? Aiden, I mean." 6 months. But that's not that important. Are you going to tell me I haven't had a chance to make sure? Don't waste your time. We've been out of work for 6 months, and we've had all sorts of things happen. He didn't ask you for anything. So why are you making up nonsense now? You've only just arrived," Emma began. "All right," Calrain sighed. "Really, I didn't want to tell the truth, but I guess I'll have to. Are you aware of how I got overseas? You don't know how it came about. I see you don't, and I'll tell you. I won a grant to study abroad. Do you know what it is?" "I know, not illiterate," Emma replied gruffly. "What's your grant got to do with it? I don't understand." "You listen to this. To get the grant, you had to write and defend a large term paper, and not the main one, although nobody canceled the main one, but a parallel paper on a serious topic, which I'm afraid won't tell you anything. I worked on this topic for a year, collected all the necessary data, processed them, analyzed them, and all this without counting the theoretical part. Such a thing had to be imagined, but you wouldn't understand. Just take my word for it, it was a serious new case. And then at the very last moment, on the day of the defense, my brother Aiden showed up, and he didn't come to support me. He said that I should be disqualified, because supposedly he actually wrote the whole paper, and I just misappropriated his work. But can you believe that? No, I for one couldn't." Emma grinned. "Why would he want to do that? If he wished, he could have done it himself. If he wanted to, yes. But he didn't want to," he replied. Calrain smiled sadly. "You know, our mother used to say that even though we were twins, our abilities were not evenly distributed. However, we don't look alike either. Aiden was always very talented, but he was lazy and uncoordinated. Well, that's what a lot of geniuses are. I, on the other hand, don't have any special abilities, but I have a lot of hard work and perseverance. So Aiden could have written that grant paper without any trouble, but he didn't want to do it. I decided to go for it. It just hurt his feelings that I was more successful than him at something, so he made this scandal at the defense. "Are you lying again?" Emma asked coldly. It's easy to check who the job really belonged to. Just a few more questions. And yet I was disqualified, he interrupted. I wasn't able to apply for the grant again until 2 years later, and of course kept my plans secret. My brother only found out when I already had a plane ticket in hand, and he hasn't wanted to know me since. I called him. I wanted to make things right, because we are family. But it ended with him cursing me with the last words. He said he regretted that I was his brother. And that's the whole story. I was angry at Aiden, so I didn't really believe it. But when I found out he was gone, of course I flew over. Too bad it was too late. It's terrible that there's no more chance of reconciliation. Well, at least not in this life, he sighed heavily. So what are you going to eat? Go wash your hands. No, Emma shook her head. I'm not hungry. Thank you. Here was where Cal Rain subtly changed. Just now he'd spoken so confidingly, and now there was a chill in his voice. Even his smile had become somewhat official. But in that case, Emma, I dare not detain you. All the best to you. What? She was confused. How? I'm not going anywhere. Coleraine shook his head sympathetically and explained patiently, like a capricious child, Emma, my dear. You and my brother are not legally married. You have no children in common. Just because you've lived here for a while doesn't mean anything. Just because you stayed with Aiden to the end, paid for his funeral, I'm grateful for that. But let's not forget that you did it entirely voluntarily. I'm the sole heir to the apartment. As for you, there's nothing more for you to do here. So pack your things, or you can come back for them later, like tomorrow. He opened the front door in front of her with exaggerated courtesy. Now let me thank you again for your concern for my brother, and good day to you. It was a pleasure to meet you, Emma. I wish you the happiness you undoubtedly deserve. Annie, like a wound-up doll, walked out of the apartment onto the landing, still holding her shoes and wet towel in her hands. I've just been kicked out of the house, she thought, and was surprised that she had no feelings about it. Though no, there was one feeling something akin to admiration for the sheer audacity of this Cal Rain, who'd been so impeccably polite, almost sympathetic, thanking Aiden for helping her, and then, without a step back from his politeness, kicking her out. It was so clean, so smoothly done, that she really did involuntarily admire him. That's how charming adventurers in movies know how to grab the viewer's attention. I just got kicked out of the house, Emma sighed, realizing that she had absolutely nowhere to go. At least, right now, nothing came to mind. She sat down on the steps to put her shoes back on. But after all, wherever she was going, it was better to be wearing shoes. Stepping out of the entryway, Emma squinted for a moment. The light stabbed her eyes as if she'd been in the dark for a week. She stood for a moment, and then, slowly adjusting to the light, opened her eyes. Oh shit, she immediately wanted to squeeze her eyes shut again. Everything around her was gray-brown, dirty snow, the shabby playground merry-go-round half-filled underfoot, the old bench with the broken seat, the chip wrappers and beer bottles scattered around the overflowing trash can. There wasn't much here to look at with pleasure. And really, it was better to close one's eyes so as not to see. Emma, someone called out softly to her. She turned around sharply. Had it really been some other Aiden brother showing up, that would be too much. But in front of her stood the grim, long-haired boy who'd first made a long speech at the school coffin and then burst into tears. At the funeral, it had seemed to her that he was a boy, no older than 17. But now she could clearly see the wrinkles in his eyes, and even the flecks of silver in his dark hair. And the look was mature, too. Probably the same age as Aiden. It's just that loose hair, the slim silhouette, the voice. It makes him seem younger. Am I related to him, too? She asked with a chuckle. The stranger, either deliberately or absent-mindedly, let her question pass his ears. You didn't go to the wake, did you? You left right after the funeral, and obviously didn't want to talk to anyone. I was worried, so I came by to check on you. Maybe you need some help or just some company. And sometimes it's good to have someone to talk to, even if it's just someone to talk to. I need a roof over my head, Emma replied, surprised at how indifferent her voice sounded, but she really didn't care much. As it happens, I have no place to live now, and I don't think you can help me with that. He silently took off his gloves and held them out to her. Actually, I can. Just you put these on first, because it's cold. My grandmother was widowed a while ago. Lives alone in a 2-bedroom. She wants me to move in with her, but there's nowhere. I only come here for funerals. My grandfather's funeral, and now Aiden's. I live up north, far away from here, but my grandmother, I think she'll be happy to have a living soul around. And you'll feel better. Would you like to go to her right now? But where are your things? Things? Emma was confused. They were left there. Now I'll go get them with you. He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. Emma noticed that he clenched them tightly into fists, but he had the most carefree look about him. Yes, I'll do it myself. I'm fast, and even faster with me. My name's Dave, by the way. Can I have garlic? Come on. He said it with such calm confidence that Emma realized there was no way to object. Okay, she agreed. Let's go. Alraine, opening the door, immediately feigned polite interest. Did you forget something, Emma? I came back to pack, she said. Yes, of course, come in. I think I might. He didn't finish, staring over her shoulder. Emma didn't look back. She knew Dave was standing there. Hey, Dave, Alraine muttered grimly. What brings you here? Dave slipped easily into the apartment past Emma. Came to help pack, he said, as if nothing had happened. I take it Aiden hasn't gotten around to it yet, and you've already moved into his apartment. Did you kick Emma out? Did she tell you that, Annie? She didn't have to say anything. Dave grinned. What? I don't know you. Okay, enough talk. Emma's moving out, and we need to get ready quickly. Emma shows us what needs to be put away. Annie walked to the room. Dave followed, not a step behind her. I didn't break anything. Alraine shouted back at him. The law's on my side. Remember that just in case. Dave didn't even look back. Do you have anything to put your things in? Emma asked. He pulled a large backpack off the mezzanine. Can I put it in here? Probably everything you need will fit. Dave's grandmother lived far away, on the outskirts of town. It's not downtown, Dave said, smiling, but it's great for people who don't like noise. There used to be a couple of research institutes here, and the houses were built for the employees. So historically, it's had a very pleasant atmosphere. Everyone's polite, quiet. And there are even 2 parks. Now they are, of course. But it's beautiful in the summer. And me, Emma admitted, I never tool like the center, noisy, crowded, no place to breathe. But it's very nice here. Mary greeted her warmly. It's great that you're going to live here. I didn't have anyone to say a word to. I have a grandson. Mary gave Dave a stern look. He's busy with work. He's got important things to do, you see. Bah, Dave laughed, kissing his grandmother on the cheek. Well, don't grumble. It's just the way it is. But I brought you Emma. Where did you come from? Mary asked. And Emma, for the umpteenth time this crazy day, was confused, but Dave came to the rescue. Amma is Aiden's girlfriend, he said quietly. They'd lived together. You don't have to go on, Granny grumbled, and looked at Emma sympathetically. You should lie down, or you look like a ghost yourself. Go on, lie down, and I'll bring you some tea in your room. Come on, don't just sit there. Hurry up. Show Dave, that's all. And I'll show you. Dave took Emma under his arm. Let me show you the new place. The room Mary had set aside for Emma was small, but surprisingly cozy. It seemed to her for a moment, as if she were back in her childhood, where her mother was still alive, and her father had not yet drunk the cottage, where there were lace curtains on the windows and geraniums in full bloom, and a wooden bed with a carved headboard, and even a bookshelf exactly like the one she had had as a child. Emma walked over to the bed for the sake of interest and tugged back a corner of the coverlet. It was. The pillow was down, and the pillowcases had puffy ruffles. Mary entered the room, carrying a large cup of tea on a tray, and to it a cinnamon bun and a small crystal vase of honey. I made you some Melissa tea, she said, setting the tray down. Melissa is a good herb. It calms the nerves and smells good. You lie down. You're out of luck, bad luck. You mean Aiden? Who knew? On. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, stroked the bedspread with her palm. Didn't he suffer? He left without regaining consciousness. Mary shook her head. No, honey, that's not what I mean. He could have lived for all I care. He left early, but it was fate. I'm talking about Calrain, the bastard. It's bad luck you ran into him. That's bad. I wish he hadn't come at all. Why are you talking about him like that? Emma asked. Do you know him? How could I not? The old lady flared up, Dave. They'd been friends since first grade. We grew up together. I knew all his friends. I knew their parents, too. How could you not? She sighed and glanced at the door, as if expecting it to open and Dave to come in. But he was sitting tactfully in the kitchen, giving the women a chance to have a hearty chat. Dave, Leah. Leah's my granddaughter. Dave has a younger sister. They're orphans. The father, my son, died in a fire. He was a fireman. When his wife found out, she brought the kids to me the same day. She disappeared. I still don't know where. Dave was only 4 years old, Leah even younger. I raised them. So how could I not know who she was friends with? So I knew Aiden well, and I knew Calrain. Then, towards the end of high school, Calrain started looking at Leah, and she was nice to him, favorable. They dated for 2 years. Everyone got used to it, thought they were going to get married. Leah must have been, I know that for a fact, strict, like I taught her. But then Calrain suddenly started telling her fairy tales, that he'd marry her within a year and they'd live well and be rich. He was singing like a nightingale and Leah got worried. How could it be? Their family was ordinary, they had no money, and Calrain was a mediocre student. Aiden was the one with the talent. Anyway, Leah told us all about it, me and Dave. Dave says, I'll find out what Calrain made up. 2 days later, Aiden comes to us. Oh, I can still remember what he was like. He was all pale, his face was all gaunt, his teeth were chattering. We all went to him, of course. What's the matter? I almost forced a glass of valerian into him, but he wouldn't take it. Then Sammy, my late husband, took out a bottle of cognac, poured 50 grams and made him drink it. And that's when Aiden seemed to calm down and started talking. And he told me this. He was writing some big work for a grant. You could win a study abroad program. And Calrain stole the paper from him and did it himself. And he ended up getting the grant. Aiden said, if he'd asked for it, I'd have given it to him myself. Is that too bad? I would have written another one. But why steal it? That's the story. I knew that Calrain was lying, said Emma, without going into details. But Mary didn't need them. He always lies, she said grimly. After the affair, Leah told him she wouldn't go out with such a thief and a scoundrel. So he started rumors about her. Dirty rumors. And there wasn't a shred of truth in them, and he had nothing to lose. He told a bunch of lies and left. Leah couldn't leave the house, they were pointing fingers at her. Dave, of course, beat up some of the more active ones, and I think he was right, except he got probation. And Leah moved to another town. Now this Calrain guy's got you out of the house, too. Maybe he's okay legally, but in my conscience, he's a vulture. That's what he is. Emma nodded silently. She was strangely relieved that Calrain had indeed turned out to be a scoundrel, and more important that Aiden had done nothing wrong, because even though she didn't believe Calrain's story, there was still a tiny traitorous doubt in the back of her mind. What if he had? I'm glad you told me all that, she said sincerely. I'm relieved, somehow. Lie down, Mary said. Lie down and don't think about anything else. She fluffed the pillows and helped Emma to get comfortable. And some tea. Mary took the cup and brought it to Emma's lips. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath of the lovely scent of molasses, and suddenly turned pale. There's something she muttered, and suddenly her stomach did a somersault and jumped to her throat. Mary deftly tilted her head to the side, and Emma was twisted to the floor. Dave, she shouted to her grandson, get some water, a towel, and a floor cloth. I'm sorry, Emma said, breathing heavily, leaning back against the pillows. Nonsense, Mary wiped her face with a towel and gave her a sip of water. How long ago? She asked briefly, and Emma suddenly realized what she was asking. Emma shook her head. I don't know. Haven't had time for that. Aiden, I see. Dave had just wiped up a puddle on the floor and was now rinsing a rag in the bathroom. Come here, Mary called out. I can't leave the girl. Grabbing her grandson by the shoulder, Mary made him lean over and whispered a few words in his ear. Emma could only make out, "Go to the drugstore." "Do you understand?" she asked. He nodded briefly and immediately walked out. "And you, Emma, have some more water." "Only in small sips," Mary added a little later. "Rest." Then the front door slammed again. Emma opened her eyes and smiled weakly. "Did you send Dave to the drugstore because of me?" "I shouldn't have. I'm fine now." "You're fine. We should go to the drugstore. It's right here on the first floor. He's not going to the ends of the earth. Tell me about your life. Do you work? Go to school?" "I'm a librarian. I met Aiden there the other day." "How far away are your parents?" "My mom died. My dad drank himself to death. I have a room in a communal apartment, but I've been renting it out since I moved in with Aiden. So that's right, I can live on my earnings." Aiden was making money too. "I'll call my tenant tomorrow and tell him to get ready to move out." "You don't have to do that," Mary said in the same uncomplaining tone as Dave. "If you go there now, you'll lose some of your money, and that's a lot of money. And you'll come home from work and sit alone in that room of yours. It'll bring back memories. It's no good. You'll go slowly insane in silence. It's best if you stay here. At least you won't be alone, and it'll be more fun for you and me. But I won't charge you any money. I've got a pension. And Dave sends me something every month. So you can stay here, and you won't have to worry about a thing. We'll see what happens." "Oh, I bought everything," came Dave's voice from the hallway. Mary got up and looked out of the room. "Come here." Then she came back into the room and handed Emma a thin cardboard package of soft pink. "And it tells you what to do." Emma took the package in her hands and quietly read, "Pregnancy test." On the kindergarten playground, there was merriment. Children's voices sounded like birds chirping. "You can't catch it. You can't catch it." And the eyes rippled from the flicker of colorful jackets, hats, and scarves. But it was still fun to watch this commotion, and passers-by smiled involuntarily and even stopped to look at the noisy children. Grace, where are you?" A young, very thin woman looked for her daughter in the crowd of playing children. This year, the fall often spoiled people with sunny days. And if such a miracle happened, the teachers took the children out for a walk to wait for their parents in the fresh air. Grace were in a hurry finally. A little red-haired girl separated from the group of children and ran up to her mom. "Mom." The woman nodded to the teacher and shouted just in case, "Grace Nichols has been taken away." "Noted," the teacher smiled and suddenly, as if remembering something, jumped up. "Wait a minute, just a minute." She ran up to the mother, machine correcting the cap on the red-headed child's head. "I wanted to tell you. Grace didn't sleep well tonight, so you better put her to bed early, or you'll have a concert by nightfall." "Wait, I don't look so surprised. It's just that the baby didn't get enough rest this afternoon." "Oh, I see. Thanks for the heads up. Oh, one more thing. Annie Alexandrovna," the teacher addressed this tired young woman by name for the first time and noticed how a grin slid across her lips. "Annie is easy. So what were you going to say?" "It's none of my business, but I think she misses your attention. She's been irritable lately, crying a lot." Emma nodded slightly. "Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you." She squeezed her daughter's hand tighter and smiled. "Shall we go?" Grace turned to the boys and shouted deafeningly, "Bye." Then she turned back to her mother. Now let's go." Emma looked at her watch. They still had an hour, so they could take their time. "That's good. In this weather, you want to take a little walk without being late." What did the teacher say? That she didn't sleep during the day, and something else important. That's right, that Grace lacks attention, Emma thought. She couldn't help but smile sadly. Attention was a good thing, of course, and there was no arguing that it was useful. But where would she find the time for it? In the last 6 months, she hadn't always had time to even look at herself in the mirror. And that didn't really upset her. Emma had a vague idea that the mirror wouldn't show her anything good. "Grace, aren't you hungry?" she asked. "I've already been told that you refuse to sleep, but you're not on a hunger strike, are you?" "No," she wrinkled her freckled nose. "No, I'm not hungry. And to be honest, I had some marshmallow for lunch," she admitted. "It wasn't good." I gave mine to Leah and ate the cookies. I see, her mother sighed. We'll go to the store and get something to eat, just in case. What's our hurry? Emma frowned, not immediately remembering that she told her daughter that. So nowhere for now. Then we'll go to work together at my place. You'll sit quietly. What am I going to do? I don't know. You could draw, for example. Or I'll give you a cell phone. Watch cartoons, we'll figure something out. Okay, Grace agreed lightheartedly and was silent for a while. Mom, she asked suddenly, why Grandma, Mary? Emma shrugged and said nothing. It was still hard for her to talk about Mary since the day Dave had introduced them. Mary had become a kindred spirit to Emma. She had taken the lonely, nearly homeless girl into her home without a word and had begun to care for her as if she were her own. It was Mary, an obstetrician and gynecologist with extensive experience, who guessed the pregnancy before she did, and it was she who persuaded a confused Emma to keep the baby. I'm not ready, Emma cried, and Aiden's gone. What's it all going to be like now? I don't know how I'm going to live on my own, and then there's the baby. What am I supposed to do now? Mary silently stroked her back. You know, I've worked in a women's clinic for 30 years, and I'll tell you the truth. I've never seen a woman who was ready. Even those who waited, who wanted to, were lost in the first moments. No one was ready. And no one ever will be. But now you need to think about this. You've got a job of some kind. And you're not carrying heavy weights. You're officially employed. So you can go on maternity leave and not worry about anything. To work will be waiting for you. And not dusty, with a convenient schedule. It will be convenient to pick up the child from the kindergarten. You'll have benefits, and you'll live here, as agreed, with the child. Why? You'll have enough room, and I'll help you. I like little kids, and it'll be easier for you. Plus, you'll rent out your room. That's money, too. In short, I don't see any reason to abort except your fear. Get some rest, think about it. The next day, she didn't have to go to work, so Mary made Emma go for a walk. Dave told you there's a nice park here. That's where we'll go. It's quiet, snowy. You just walk and breathe the fresh air. And Emma walked slowly, looking at the bare trees and noting the twigs and the bright specks of bullfinches. Suddenly, a decision came to her. Emma stopped. Mary, I want this baby, she said. I realize now that I really do. Mary nodded thoughtfully. That's good. When we get home, I'll call my folks at my old job. They'll look after you properly. Indeed, when Emma arrived at the counseling office the next day, she was already expected. She'd been sent to the best doctor, and throughout the pregnancy she'd been treated with care and attention, not missing a single significant detail. And after Grace was born, both Mary and Dave, who had come to town for the occasion, came to the discharge. It's so nice to be at a birthday party, he smiled as he handed Emma the flowers. We've all missed joyous occasions, haven't we? Emma, seeing them both, felt as if someone had thrown a soft, warm blanket over her shoulders. She wasn't alone. Her own mother, like Aiden, was gone, but they were still there, the people who were close to her, with flowers and balloons. And there's cake waiting for us at home, Mary said with a wink. She loved a baby at once. It's like having a great-granddaughter, she said, rocking the baby. Mary often took the girl to let Emma sleep. Walking with the stroller, she brought up pediatricians she knew so Grace would have the best medical support possible. Emma didn't know how she should thank this wonderful woman, but Mary only waved her off. Your business is to recover properly from childbirth. That's the best thanks you can give. Remember, a baby needs a healthy mom. When the baby was 4, Mary went into labor. Her heart condition was becoming more and more frequent, and for the last 2 weeks she had not left her bed. Emma could not persuade her to go to the hospital. Doctors don't like to be treated, Mary said lightheartedly. You'd better bring Grace and I'll read to her. Mary, what's reading to you? You're not breathing very fast. Let's go to the hospital. There are doctors like you there. They'll help. But it was impossible to convince the old lady, so Emma, breaking Mary's strict injunction, called Dave. He came that night, and despite her grandmother's vehement protests, made arrangements with everyone he could, and Mary found herself in a luxurious, very expensive cardiology center. Don't worry about the money, Dave said. I've paid for everything, the room, the treatment, the necessary tests, the nurse, and I'll pay for anything else you need. But now I have to go back to work, I have to fly back. Call me every day, anytime." Emma said with just her lips, "Thank you." She didn't know if Dave had a clue, but she didn't doubt it. The treatment wouldn't help. The waxen pallor of Mary's face, her frozen features all pointed to the imminent end. Emma knew it and didn't want to believe it. She wished she didn't know, but she had seen too many deaths, her father, her mother, Aiden. It was impossible to concentrate at work, and at home, Emma was at a standstill, waiting every minute for the hospital to call. After 24 hours, Emma asked a doctor she knew to open a sick note, and then went to the clinic to see Mary. "To take me on as a nurse," she told the head doctor on the doorstep, "or a janitor. Whatever it takes, I need to be here. I'm scared at work and at home. This woman is like a mother to me. When I know I can see her at any moment, I feel better." Emma never found out why they hired her without talking to her. Maybe they really needed a nurse. She tried to take shifts every day. Mary was used to seeing her and waved hello. It was getting harder and harder to talk. Emma came into the room and talked nonstop, telling Mary about Grace's progress in kindergarten, what she'd seen on her way to work, and all sorts of news. From time to time, if the shift fell at night, she took her daughter with her. The little girl learned to read by syllables and read fairy tales to her grandmother, and when she was tired, she went to sleep on the sofa in the hallway. On one such night, when Grace was already asleep, Emma looked into the room, sat on the edge of the bed, and took Mary's hand affectionately. "How are you?" she asked. Mary smiled weakly. "You know," Emma said quietly, her eyes downcast, "somehow there's never enough time to say anything important. It always seems like there's no time, or it's the wrong moment. I think it's always the right moment, and there are few, if any, more important things to do. That's how I think. And I want to tell you that if it wasn't for you and Dave, I don't know how I'd live. I guess I'd live somehow, but not as well as I do now. I'd be cold, lonely on this earth. You're the ones who got me out, and Grace has become a kindred grandmother, and it's hard to imagine a better one. And you're like a mom to me. It's like you were sent to me to be a second mom and to love me and keep me and Grace safe." Emma paused to look at Mary and cried out silently. The woman still had a smile on her lips, but her gaze had become matte and fixed. She couldn't remember the time before the funeral very well. Dave had taken over organizing everything, and Leah, who had flown in from Vladivostok, had instantly assessed Emma's condition. Her wan eyes and the huge, thick shadows beneath them, her trembling hands, her breaking voice. "All right," Leah said, "you go to bed right now. No running around town and no funeral preparations. Dave can handle it. And I'll go to the daycare center and pick up Grace and tell her not to disturb your rest." "Of course you can't do that now," Leah said sternly. "You need sleep, rest. Grace, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. And now I'll give you a good sleeping pill. It will make you sleep for 24 hours. But don't freak out. It's just the way it is. But you need your sleep. One more thing. Dave and I have both decided that you can continue to live here and don't argue. Grandma would have wanted that herself." Emma thought involuntarily that Leah looked a lot like her grandmother. After the funeral came a time when Emma had a hard time answering her daughter's questions. Grace, like most children her age, didn't really understand what death was, and kept asking if Grandma Mary would visit them where she was now, and why, since she couldn't come visit from the other world, wouldn't she at least call? Emma patiently answered countless questions, but then began to simply change the topic of conversation. Grace responded immediately and didn't bring up her grandmother again. "Let's go look at something at the store," Emma suggested. We were going to get something nice, like ice cream. Grace instantly forgot about her grandmother and turned her attention to the shopping. A chocolate bar. A candy bar would be better. "I think we'll take yogurt, bananas, and a bun." Emma smiled. "That should be enough." Entering the hospital, Emma looked around curiously, as if for the first time. Strangely, after working here for 2 months, she hadn't paid much attention to her surroundings. She had come here for one purpose, and that was to see Mary. So she had no time to look at her surroundings. But today, on her last shift, she suddenly noticed that the walls were painted a delicate blue with watercolor flecks of gold. And the sofa where Grace fell asleep was white and looked like a cloud against the blue walls. That's how it happens. She was working and didn't notice what was around her. Grace sat on the couch. "Here's a book for you. I'll be done here soon," Emma said, changing into her hospital uniform. "All I have to do today is..." But her daughter had already run away. It was a good thing, because Emma didn't feel like talking. She had stayed here for some time after Mary's death, only because it seemed as if she would be gone. And then it would be finally and irrevocably clear that Mary was really dead, as if the last thread that still bound them together would be severed. But the library had already called. Tired of putting up with the endless hospitalization, they were calling her back. It was time to accept the inevitable. "Oh, Mom, look, is someone in Grandma Mary's room?" Grace sprinted toward the open door. Grace stopped, but she was already in the room ahead of her mom. "I'm sorry," Emma mumbled. Emma froze on the doorstep. On the bed, the same one Mary had been in the other day, was a large, blonde-haired man in an oxygen mask. He glanced over at Emma and smiled slightly. "You've got a fall," Grace said quietly and picked up something from the floor. The man took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Ma, she held out a piece of paper she had picked up from the floor. Emma picked it up and read in some foreign language, "Emma Vertex." Her telephone number was written below it. "It's me, Top," she said, raising her eyes. "That's my number." But the man lay there, not moving, not opening his eyes. He also didn't seem to be breathing. Emma suddenly recognized him. Cal Rain. She ran out into the hallway. "Get a doctor. The man's sick." "Emma, is that you?" The head doctor peeked out of the neighboring room, 116. "He's already." Grace huddled fearfully against her mother. "Mom, is he what?" Emma stroked her daughter's head. "The doctor will help him. Let's get out of here and sit somewhere quiet while I'm here." Annie sat down on the sofa and carefully distracted her daughter with games while a stretcher was wheeled past. On it, covered with a sheet, lay Cal Rain. The head doctor came out of the room and silently spread his hands. "This fell out of his hands," Emma said, pulling a note from her pocket, my name and phone number. "Did you two know each other?" She grinned. "Technically, it's just weird. I'll give it to whoever shows up for the body," the doctor promised. "And you know what? Go home. It's your last shift. It's almost over. And the baby's still, you've had enough excitement. Go, I know you're tired." Emma couldn't tell you how grateful she was for that understanding. As she drove home, she thought of Cal Rain and their one and only meeting. It had been too much. She received a call a week later. "Emma Alexandrovna, you must excuse us for some delay. Karain Andreevich guessed that it would be difficult to find you, but we were just lucky." The head doctor of the clinic where he was lying. "I know," she replied. "My daughter found this note. I just don't see what this has to do with me. We weren't friends." "And what does this have to do with you? Only Karain Andreevich knows that? But according to his will, all his movable and immovable property goes to you. But he has no other heirs, so after 6 months you'll be able to claim your rights without any difficulty." "Movable and immovable," Emma smiled incredulously. "You're making a lot of sense. We are talking about 2 apartments in your city. His late parents' place and the apartment of his brother, who passed away a few years ago. There's also some property where he lived, but you'll need to consult an international law specialist. And, yes, one more thing. Namely, a country house with a plot of land just outside your town. All this is bequeathed to one Leah Panina." "Leah," Emma muttered. "It turns out that before his death, he was tormented by conscience." "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "Nothing," Emma replied. "If you want Leah's contacts, I'll give you her number. Write it down." She had finished talking a few seconds before the doorbell rang. Dave? I thought you weren't coming." "I took 2 weeks off work," he said. "I wanted to be here for 9 days, and then I didn't want to leave without talking to you." "If this is about the apartment," Emma began, "I'll move in. I've taken advantage of your hospitality enough already." No, he took her hand. "This has nothing to do with the apartment. I just wanted to talk about something else. I've wanted to for a long time, but I haven't had the chance." "Then you're pregnant, and you just buried Aiden. You haven't had time for me. Then Grace was just a baby. Then Grandma got sick. I've been meaning to tell you for a long time. Emma, if you've let Aiden go, and wanted to start a family again. He bit his lip and continued, "But you're good to me, aren't you?" "Of course I am," Emma assured him. She didn't know what to say to him, so, as usual, she decided to just tell the truth. "I'm very good to you, and I'm so grateful for everything, but I haven't thought of anything else, probably because I didn't have time to think about it either. But now I promise I will think about the future. Just give me some time." She smiled and caught the reflection of her smile in his eyes. "Isn't he handsome?" Emma thought with surprise. Somehow I hadn't noticed that before. "Give me a little time," she repeated. "I'm in no hurry," he said. "I understand. Take all the time you need. And now please give me some tea. I'm terribly cold for some reason." And 6 months later, everything started to happen like a kaleidoscope. An inheritance, a fancy wedding, a honeymoon on the warm sea. And again, it was like déjà vu, Dave running to the drugstore to get a pregnancy test. "Dad, well, why did you bring me up? You left Mom and me years ago. And I missed your love, your support." Annie only now decided to come to the grave. He'd had another family for a long time, and no one had invited Annie to the funeral. She had learned of her father's death from a notary who announced that she had a right to inherit from that second, apparently more proper family from her father's point of view. Annie had a sister, Emily. They had seen each other a few times while Dad was still alive. He really wanted them to be friends. But it didn't work out that way. They just didn't have anything to talk about. Annie looked at the chubby blonde with green eyes in amazement. She was just like her mother, both in looks and personality. Both shouty, pushy, ambitious, constantly demanding attention. If everyone isn't looking at them, it's a disaster. And now Emily and her mother were staring at her with bulging eyes. She could hardly ask them to show her father's grave, as if they were doing her a favor. She was a stranger to them, coming from another planet from the past and unexpectedly taking a bite out of something Emily and her mother felt they had no right to. "How much longer are we going to be here?" her half-sister resented. The cold autumn wind parted her colorless hair, her nose reddened, her eyes watery. Another alien trait, Emily and her mother couldn't stand the cold at all. Moreover, they simply hated wind and rain. Today, however, as if on demand, it was both. "I'd like to stay here a little longer. And you can leave now. Thanks for showing me the grave." Annie wasn't going to fight with them. There was no one to share anymore. All these years her father had helped her in important moments of her life, congratulated her on her birthday, holidays, paid for her education, even dropped in for half an hour at the wedding. And it wasn't these two women's fault that Dad always seemed disgruntled, doing his time. I sort of forced myself to pretend to be a fatherly concern, but it didn't work out so well. "Suit yourself, just be warned, you'll be stomping all the way across the cemetery. They won't let cabs on the grounds," her half-sister shrugged. Annie was grateful that at least she wasn't pretending to love her. It was easier that way. She didn't have to pretend to be a good sister either. The blonde-haired, cheerful ladies got into the car, laughing loudly and discussing something, and drove off. Maybe they were attached to their father in their own way, but they were not going to deprive themselves of the joy of life, laughter, and shopping because of him. Where were they going after visiting the cemetery? That was a trait of their family, too. Alien, foreign, incomprehensible. Annie was different, dark-haired, brown-eyed, and tall. Just like her mom, she took her father's death hard. She also loved the wind, the cold, the rain. Annie had long remembered both the good and the bad. She must have seemed strange to Emily and her mother, too boring, dramatizing everything. "That's what her stepmother said, Annie. What's with the sour face? You're young. You've got the money. Have fun. Live your life." "I guess it's only one life," Erica said it kindly, like she wanted to comfort her. Except they were too different. She sat by the grave for a long time, wondering why her father had left the world he and her mother had left, where everyone felt deeply and were truly attached to each other, for that shallow, superficial, empty world. Maybe Dad got tired of them, fell out of love, wanted an easier life, or maybe something irreparable had happened between him and Mom. The two parts of the continent suddenly split forever. The crack might not have been noticeable from the outside, but they had just become strangers. That's what Annie was thinking. Until the cemetery keeper tapped her on the shoulder. She had to go. "Are you all right?" asked the man, who looked more like a vagrant than a satisfied cemetery worker. Annie looked at him and thought he was probably just a part-timer. That's why he had not yet penetrated the cheerful and cynical philosophy "they die, we get rich." The tramp was still quite young, but somehow desperately thin. There was compassion in his blue eyes, and that made Annie come to her senses. "I'm all right," she said. "Would you like some tea?" "You look a little pale," asked the watchman. "No, I just need to call a cab. It's time to go home. It's too early for me to stay here." "That's sad," he smiled. "That's right. You've got your whole life ahead of you. My name is Damien, by the way. Let me walk you out. There's all sorts of people hanging around here." "Thank you. I don't really know my way around a cemetery. My name's Annie." They talked about something as they walked to the gate. But the young woman was more on automatic, so she didn't remember much. Damien was filling in for the watchman, who'd been drinking for the last time. He didn't have a steady job yet, and he didn't have a place to live either. Annie even wanted to give him some money, but the guy refused. Just waited for the cab to arrive. He looked at the driver, slipped the bills into his hands, and said, "Deliver it, brother, in the best possible way." He nodded. Annie didn't have time to understand anything why he had paid for her, how he knew the neighborhood where she lived. Ah, yes, I think she told him she didn't live that far away. It was only about a 40-minute drive home. She just waved and smiled at this strange new acquaintance. Damien was very sad, but in a way that was his own, native, empathetic, deeply sympathetic, even unfamiliar to her. Annie thought that maybe that was what guardian angels looked like when they materialized in this sometimes cold and indifferent world, just to give a little support. It's as if one is surfacing, taking a gulp of air. Then you can hang on for a while longer. Dad would say, "Now, Annie, don't get all philosophical or your husband will run away," or maybe he's always been such an outsider. That's why he's gone into a world that's near and dear to him. Still, it's a pity that 5 years before his death, she did not see him. It hurt that he came to the wedding just for half an hour, handed over the money, and ran away. Is money the most important thing? Her husband and mother-in-law thought it was, though. Lately, Eden and his mother had only been talking about the inheritance she had received, so she didn't really want to go home. Of course, the mother-in-law was understandable. Darcy was worried about her son, an aspiring businessman who was failing on all fronts and had accumulated a lot of debt. Eden was from a middle-class family, so his mother had no money to help him out, no matter how much she wanted to. And so Darcy relied heavily on the inheritance that Annie had received. When her daughter-in-law came home from work, her mother-in-law, with the sly smile of a wise woman, would talk from afar about how the money should be spent wisely. Then she told me that she and her son are now her family for life. And family is the greatest treasure of all. Yes, I see what you're saying, Darcy. You're trying to insinuate that I should pay off your son's debts, and as soon as possible, so that you don't feel pain in your soul, and you can be at ease. Annie's family was accustomed to be blunt, not to beat around the bush. Her mother-in-law was always angry after such a sharp rebuke. "Oh, you'll never get away with disrespecting your elders. Why do you make me some kind of self-serving? I'm taking care of you. I gave you the most precious thing in the world, my child." "You know, Darcy, Eden is no longer a child. He's 35, Annie replied. The mother-in-law would get hysterical and run away, slamming the door to her room. Darcy rented the apartment and lived with the young couple in the third room, supposedly waiting for grandchildren. Annie didn't like it very much, but she didn't dare chase the older woman away. After all, she really had no one but her son. "Annie, why are you snapping at your mother again? I know your father was sick for a long time and you didn't know about it. Otherwise, we would have made up. You feel bad for your dad. But that's no reason to take it out on my mom. Anyway, where have you been for so long? Does the accounting department work late? Or is this something new?" Eden was always defending his mother. Annie could see that her husband was taking a jab at her, reminded her of her guilt in front of her father. "Actually, it was you and your mother who kicked your father out. He went down and died, and you didn't care. You didn't even give him a proper burial because he was buried with the other homeless in a mass grave. What right have you got to reproach me?" Annie knew it was wrong to say that. And she didn't know why she was hitting a nerve. She was just tired. No one was supporting her at home. Everyone was just trying to get her inheritance out of her. It was like she was an ATM machine instead of a person. How can you bring that up? And if my mom hears it, she's going to be hysterical. Well, they kicked him out and they did the right thing, Eden said. My father was a mistake of nature. It's a good thing he didn't live long. Why would a man like that suffer? Eden had never spoken of his late father that way before. Usually he just avoided the subject. Annie looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Before, her husband had seemed mean, stubborn, but not angry. She'd thought he'd just made a mistake when he'd helped his mother in an unfair way, and regretted the mistake. But now she realized she knew nothing about her husband, as if she'd been living blindfolded all this time. Darcy had disliked Annie from the first time they'd met. She'd tried to introduce Eden to a more affluent fiancé, invited her to visit in passing, and always went to the hospital when they were going on vacation. Of course, when everything was canceled, Darcy recovered dramatically. And yet they were able to defend their relationship. You got married? I didn't believe the one with whom oranges could be born. Yes, Eden seemed infantile, childishly stubborn, and even sometimes rude, but still not bad and even touching. Annie had waited a long time for him to grow up and not look into his mother's mouth when he had his own opinions. And now it seems her husband has indeed grown up. Except that, to her dismay, she suddenly began to realize that she was facing an advanced version of her mother-in-law. Over the years, her husband was becoming more and more like his mother, and the process was irreversible. And he chose another way to blame others for all problems, to solve them at someone else's expense, and value only power, money, and those who can provide these resources. And yet she still loved him, believed that her husband had not completely turned that fateful corner, where people become flawed and selfish. And the thought came to mind that it is necessary to just live separately from her mother-in-law. Then maybe everything will still get better. Touching, tall, slightly overweight man with gray eyes and long eyelashes, something like a baby bear, gradually turned into a fat, bald boar, insolent, uncompromising. What if all this could be stopped? If Annie helped him, maybe Eden would remember all the touching things that had happened between them, how they'd walked under the moon, holding hands, and talked about everything. How he'd proposed to her after Darcy had once again berated her and called her unfit for a son. You know, it's time for the inheritance, Annie suggested the next morning. Oh, this calls for a celebration. You've finally regained your ability to think. He disappeared into the kitchen. When he came back, he smelled of alcohol. What are you doing? I thought you were driving me. Now what? Do I have to call a cab? Annie sighed. Her husband had been drinking a lot lately to forget about business problems. It was a bad tendency, because Darcy, too, often had a bottle and then threw tantrums and pretended she hadn't had a drop. She was just a sensitive and deeply suffering person. Annie was beginning to tire of this family's habits. Is she going to be the only adult here who's responsible for everything? Don't worry about it. It's only an hour's drive to the notary. And I know some police officers. It's a weekday, there won't be any traffic. Annie tried to call a cab, but as it happened, the operator said that no one would arrive before an hour. The app also showed long waiting times. The only thing left was to refuse the trip or accept her husband's offer. To the notary, there was an appointment, otherwise sit in the general queue. So you couldn't be late. Okay, how much have you had to drink? She asked. Eden cheerfully showed between his fingers 1.5 millimeters. Promise me you'll drive slowly, said his wife sternly. And there's my queen. She should have been wary when her husband said that. Eden only called her a queen when she had at least half a glass. But then for some reason she chose to ignore it. She'd let her guard down. She'd thought she'd make a quick trip there and back, and the family would stop nagging. It turned out to be the wrong decision. Darcy pretended to love her that morning. That was a bad sign too, but they ignored it that day. Do you need to slow down? There's a bridge coming up. It's raining today. The road is slippery, she asked her husband anxiously. A lot of fast drivers have lost their lives in the raging river below the bridge. That's why even the most experienced drivers drove over it with caution. If anything happens, the railing won't stop them. You're such a nerd. You're lucky I married you. You know what? Eden smirked a wicked, cocky smile and turned to kiss her cheek, like he often did when he said something hurtful, but at the same time didn't want to get into an argument. Watch the road, Annie shouted. And that was the last thing she had time to say. The brakes were already squealing and the car spun around. And then there was a violent impact, and as if through a veil, she heard the splash of water. And on the verge of losing consciousness, for some reason she whispered, "Daddy, Mommy, I'm coming to you." And she wasn't afraid. At that moment, even on the contrary, some kind of calmness came. No more deciding, no more choosing. No more fear of making a mistake. Everything would be settled once and for all. She remembered that she couldn't swim, so she didn't even try to unbuckle her belt. As they were diving, Annie turned to face Eden, unbuckled his belt with all her might, and then slowly opened the window and tried to shake him out. Her husband woke up and began making efforts to swim out. Before she finally lost consciousness, she had time to notice that he wasn't trying to help her in any way. Well, so be it. Then I'm not needed was her last thought. Her parents appeared before her eyes, but for some reason they weren't happy to see her. They pushed her in the chest, saying, "It's too early for you, come back." She woke up from those pushes. And the first person she saw was the guardian angel of the cemetery, Damien. She remembered his name. "Wake up, then. I was surprised to see it was you I pulled out. I guess it's just a coincidence, isn't it? Don't worry, we were able to get your husband out, too." Damien was soaking wet. Water was dripping off him. All right. No more heroics. You need to go to the hospital, too. You can barely stand. "The ambulance and the police will be here in a minute," said a retired emergency doctor among the crowd. He realized that the vagrant now needed help himself. He persuaded him to wait for the doctors. "What's wrong with you?" "I got a part-time job today, and I'm late as it is. If I skip work, they won't give me a job. And then what to live on?" The homeless man was indignant. "You know what, buddy? If you die, you won't need the money. Let's get settled. That's enough of your exploits for today. You saved 2 people while the rest of us were just calling 911. If you want, I'll call your job myself," the older man said. He tried to explain to Damien that his condition was no less dangerous than those he had saved. Then he turned to Annie. "You're very lucky. That daredevil jumped off the bridge just as you were beginning to dive. Could have been killed. And your husband was unconscious? He hit his head trying to swim out the window. And you were strapped in. So you owe him a lifetime of gratitude." Then he turned around to see if the ambulance had arrived. The tramp was nowhere to be seen. He ran away to keep his part-time job. "Did you fix me up?" Annie asked the kindly old man. "If I'd come later because of the traffic, that poor guy would have been standing there. He saved you." "You owe him your life," the retired doctor said, and told Annie that her husband had hurt his head, so he might well have a concussion. He repeated all this to the ambulances and police who arrived. The cops were especially lamenting that the vagrant had slipped away before they arrived. It would have made it easier to fill out the report. "We were told you said you called the homeless guy by name. Do you know him?" the cop asked. "No, I just thought he was someone I knew from stress." Annie lied. She thought that her rescuer might have his own good reasons to avoid meeting with the authorities. Annie was very tired. If anything, remember, call, the policeman gave his card, and she went with her husband to the hospital. Fortunately, it turned out that Eden didn't have a concussion. He could have refused to be hospitalized, but he decided it was worth it to be on the safe side. And Annie came home alone. What happened? Where's my son? The phones were down, and she couldn't give any advance warning that she'd be back with a bandaged arm. Eden's fine. Darcy, he's in the hospital. You can go to him right now. Annie didn't have the energy for a detailed explanation. She wanted to collapse into bed and sleep for a couple days. There was no energy left at all. It was like she'd come back from the dead. But she was. Was it your fault? Probably just arguing with him like always, distracting him from the road. Who's he going to leave me for? If anything happens, I'll stay with your family, Darcy's mother-in-law howled. Here's the doctor's phone number. You can call and make sure Eden's okay. Annie tried to comfort her again. You're just waiting for me to die. Who would doubt it? I can imagine how upset you were that my son wasn't killed, or else you wouldn't have had to pay your debts and the money would have been safe. And her mother-in-law continued to harass Annie. The young woman swallowed the resentment lodged in her throat. Actually, she was trying to help her husband. That's why she went to the notary. And even underwater, she was trying to help him, not herself. She wanted to tell Darcy all of this, but she looked into the soulless eyes that looked like glass buttons and realized it was not worth the effort to justify herself. Darcy didn't like her. She'd always hated her. She would continue to dislike her, no matter what she did. I need to rest, Annie said, and went to her room. There was some shouting outside the door. It was the mother-in-law who continued to bemoan her daughter-in-law's callousness. Sonny is almost dying there, and she has nothing to do. That's what they've got on the family bosom, Darcy grumbled. She decided not to go to the hospital. She'd taken too much on her chest, and her legs weren't holding up very well. She had already mentally noted that her daughter-in-law would finally pay off her son's debts. And here was such that it was only necessary to add more alcohol to survive the fact that not only the trip to the notary, but also lost the car. And her son would be out of work for a while. The next day, Annie decided to follow through and went to the notary right from the morning. This is the amount the deceased bequeathed to you, said a white-haired man of indeterminate age, and wrote a number with many zeros on the paper. Annie was not very surprised. She hadn't expected her father to leave so much. It would be enough, perhaps, for a couple of apartments in the capital, and not in the worst of places. How do I get the money? She asked. You just come to the bank and they will give it to you, the notary explained. Annie wanted to go to her husband's hospital to tell him the good news, so she called. Eden, hi. How are you? I'll come and see you this afternoon. Listen, don't. My mom's coming over. I don't want you two to start fighting again, he asked in a voice that sounded like Annie was guilty of something. All right, then I'll see you tomorrow. His wife decided that she would not tell such good news over the phone. She would tell him in person. Okay, but call beforehand. I have a lot of procedures and exams to do, Eden mumbled in a resentful and arrogant voice. Not once did he ask how she was feeling. It was unpleasant. In fact, the doctor had recommended that she go to the hospital too, but she had overpowered herself so as not to scare her mother-in-law too much. And her husband, who through his own fault had been in a car accident and almost killed them both. Now he's acting all hurt and humiliated. We should find that tramp, share it with him. Damien deserves it far more than Eden and his mother Annie thought. She had never been greedy. Her mother had taught her to share even the last of it. And here, as they say, it was God's will to support the man who had saved her life. There's a reason a hobo would go to work, even in his condition. He must be desperate for money, barely surviving. She realized only now that she didn't know where to find Damien, so she went straight from the bank to the only place she knew. She'd brought a bouquet of white roses with her. Mom said that when Daddy still loved her, he used to give her those flowers. Now, you and Mom said it was too soon for me to die. Thank you for leaving the money. I want to share it with a good man, Annie thought as she left the bouquet on the grave. Then she went to ask the cemetery workers where to find the hobo. Yes, he does that sometimes. Doesn't come here very often, was all the information she could get. That was the answer of one grim man with a shovel. The others looked at her suspiciously and silently dispersed, as if she had asked something forbidden. Maybe he's in trouble with the law, hiding out. And where can I find him? Annie was desperate and decided she couldn't find someone she wanted to thank so badly. What, crying? Can't wait for a cab? Out of nowhere, as if from under the ground, a hobo appeared in front of her. Actually, from the rock, she took from his hands a cup of tea, which Damien poured directly from the thermos. She took a sip. The tea was too sweet, but it seemed to be just what she needed right now. Yes, I heard. I was just hoping you'd leave, Damien admitted, blushing. Why? I wanted to thank you, actually. The best thanks is that you're alive, Damien said, embarrassed. He was clearly not used to being thanked. You know, can I come into your gatehouse? I need to talk to you, she asked. "Yes, I'm the only one on duty today," he said, surprised, and nodded. She went into a small room where the wind whistled desperately in the corners and an old refrigerator hummed in the corner. The TV was muttering something, and the sofas and armchairs had clearly been in service for at least half a century. On a table with flimsy legs there was an oilcloth with faded colored squares. "Welcome." My residence Damien apologized, waving his hands. "I'm sorry," he pointed to the most decent chair, on which he'd thrown a blanket. "I didn't grow up in the lap of luxury either. My mother and I lived modestly." She told her story about how, when she was still a child, my father left and remarried. And now he left an inheritance. So I decided to share it with you. The money literally fell on my head. I didn't expect it, and I didn't deserve it. Damien waved his hands at her and began to refuse. "What am I? Not human? You think if I'm a vagrant I can't help for free?" "No, I don't think that at all. You even paid for me in the cab, even though you saw me for the first time and could have been the last. Why would you do that?" She was trying to get Damien to talk, to connect with him. "It's just that you were so unhappy, so lonely. And I thought there was something more I could do for you. Well, I just liked you. I'm sorry I didn't know you were married," the tramp said, embarrassed. "I am. You guessed right. I've been very unhappy lately. I guess I have a husband, but he doesn't care about me. You rescued us and saw that he didn't even help me unbuckle myself," Annie sighed. She didn't know why she was telling him this. She hadn't had anyone to talk to about it since the accident. At least now she'd gotten something out, and it felt better. "I thought he just hit his head. That's why he couldn't help you," Damien lied. Of course, he realized that Eden was only trying to save his own skin. And he'd been wrong precisely because he'd been in too much of a hurry to get out of the car. If it hadn't been for the penknife in his safe pocket, Annie might not have been saved. The lock was jammed. "So, Frank for Frank. Do you have someone in your life whom you love?" he asked. "Yes, Kate. She's like my mom. The only person I've ever loved. I don't know what would have happened to me if it weren't for her. I guess I'd have gone down a crooked road." Damien said that when he was 15, he got involved with a bad crowd and ran away from the orphanage, and his counselor was supportive. He's been visiting her ever since. "So that's why you don't have a place to live." "So you ran away because you didn't get an apartment?" Annie asked. "Well, yes, it was dangerous at first, because I was being sought out by people I refused to help in a bad case. I warned a decent man that he was going to be robbed. He was prepared. My former associates were looking for me. And then things just kind of spiraled. I was afraid of everyone and everything. I figured I'd just make it work somehow. No one in our family has ever lived long," Damien said. "What if you're the first?" Annie said with a smile. "I don't think so. I used to live for Kate. She doesn't have any children of her own. But she's going to die soon. The money for the operation is insane. And there's nowhere to get it. Not in a lifetime. If I had an apartment right now, I'd sell it in a heartbeat. Maybe I'd have enough. But as it happens, I'm a loser," Damien said, blushing for some reason. Annie had already pulled herself together. A blush appeared on her cheeks, and Damien thought she was very pretty. What a blessing it would be to come home every day to be greeted by such a beautiful girl. Too bad he would never have a family. Damien felt kind of uncomfortable at the thought. She's married. There's exactly zero chance of that. Even if she were, beautiful and well-mannered ladies don't want to marry men like him. Damien tells me that Kate is basically waiting her turn. There is a chance that she will do the operation at the expense of the state. But it's not easy to wait, because people have been waiting for a quota for years. "You know what? Can I help?" Annie was struck by this simple story of love and devotion. She decided she could give half the money. It wouldn't be a big deal. She'd never counted on her father's inheritance anyway. Her mother had always taught her to rely only on herself. Of course, working as an accountant, you could not save much, but still her mother left her some modest apartment, and she managed to put some money aside from her paycheck. The remaining half will be enough to help Eden solve his problems. And everyone will be fine. But you could use the money yourself. Well, for the kids Damien countered. Who who was taken aback by her generosity. Usually people quickly forgot they'd been rescued and just went on with their lives. And this strange woman was wandering around the cemetery looking for him just to thank him and help him. Damien's heart grew warm at the very fact that such a thing was possible in life. So he was not an empty place after all, and there were still enough good people in the world. My husband and I don't have children yet. I don't think he really wants any. So will it ever come to that? I don't know. But your kindergarten teacher can and should be saved now, Annie argued. Well, it's hard to turn down that kind of help. Let's exchange phone numbers. What if I can help too, or return at least a part of it someday? After much persuasion, Damien thought that he was not taking the money for himself, but to save a very good man. Perhaps that's why fate is sending them. So what's the big deal? Sure. Write down my phone number, Annie said excitedly. A stone fell from her soul. She didn't doubt for a minute that she was doing the right thing. Damien called her that evening and told her that Kate would be operated on this week. There's an open window and everything they need. But you didn't want to take money for the operation? She rejoiced, forgetting about her mother-in-law, who, as always, was eavesdropping. Annie, what were you just talking about? Darcy was wary. Who are you helping? From what means? Darcy clung to every ruble. She even controlled what brand of powder her sister-in-law bought and how much she spent on laundry. A notebook of counts and receipts was her favorite treasure. This did not mean that the mother-in-law controlled the money to help the young family. No, she just liked to count what her daughter-in-law spent on. And she wasn't going to help at all. And she taught me that in a modern family, it's every man for himself. That was until she found out about Annie's inheritance. Now everything's changed. Everyone couldn't do for themselves anymore. It was selfish. Everything had to go into the pot. Or rather, in her mother-in-law's logic, she had to put everything into the family. And Darcy and her son had the right to do their best for themselves. It was a very comfortable position. It was advantageous. Don't worry, Darcy. I only spend my own money. She didn't name the amount she'd given, but accidentally said that she was going to the hospital to visit an elderly woman who'd been helped by a vagrant at the end of the week. You don't want to visit your husband by any chance, or do you care more about other people? The mother-in-law frowned haughtily. You know, if it were not for these so-called strangers, neither I nor your son would not be alive at all. So if you're always counting every ruble, you should consider that you might not have gotten anything if that tramp hadn't saved us at the risk of his own life. Annie got angry and stopped her mother-in-law's insolence. It's not like she's asking for anything. Then why is Darcy sticking her nose in everything? Don't be so dramatic. You can help a tramp a little if you want to. But why give money? The operation must have cost a lot. Darcy tried to find out how much her foolish daughter-in-law had spent. That's none of your business. You'd better manage your own money, Annie retorted. She was tired of being treated so insultingly. Obviously, if her mother-in-law had received the inheritance, she wouldn't have shared it. And her husband would have clutched his money. They were comfortable with what was hers to share and everything else under their control. Darcy hissed something and went to her room. She wrote down the hospital and the name of the patient her sister-in-law had given money to for the surgery. And a little later in the evening, when Annie went to the bathroom, she found the time call from Damien and transcribed the number. Now it would be possible to know everything exactly and not have to ask her daughter-in-law, a little bit at a time. The following week, mother and son had a conversation. Mom, but how can we contest the will? The surgery was done too. No one is going to get the money back. Especially not this tramp who saved us. Son, listen, we're talking about a huge sum of money. You could buy an apartment and have a steady income for the rest of your life. Did you ever think that when you stay with her, you'll have to deal with your debts? Why would I break up with her? She doesn't know about the mistress. You won't tell her. What's on your mind? Mother asked. Of course I can. We'll get that money back. But to do that, you'll have to pretend to be seriously ill. Eden, pretend you suffered brain damage in the accident and you need a huge amount of money for treatment. How can I do that? The doctors won't confirm it. No, it's not as simple as you think. Everything in this world can be bought. money will get you any certificate you want, and they'll confirm anything. Even the fact that you are dead. My mother told me that she had already agreed with the doctor, and he does not charge much for his services. Well, I mean, I'll pretend to be sick. You'll press my wife's conscience that she should help me. And then we just sue and get back at least some of the money that is supposedly needed for my treatment. Did I understand you correctly? My son asked. That's right. That's right. Finally, you've got it, said the mother. She was beginning to fear that her son had really lost his mind and was ready to part with a huge sum of money without a fight. But fortunately, Eden is a sensible boy, just like her, or almost like her. If he were like his mother, he wouldn't have gotten into debt. But come on, she'll help him, but not out of her own pocket. Darcy didn't tell her that she would gradually have to confirm that Annie was the cause of the accident. That's a bigger, mean-spirited thing to do. And her son might not agree to it right away. Once he gets involved, he won't back down. A month or so passed. Darcy's plans proceeded without a hitch. Bribed witnesses testified that Annie was indirectly responsible for the accident. Allegedly, someone in a neighboring car saw her spouse yelling at Eden as she drove over the bridge. And he was very upset. And among those who saw their rescue by a vagrant found a need for money mean people who confirmed that Annie smelled of alcohol. She was also allegedly pounding her husband and yelling, "When am I going to get rid of you? Nothing gets you." Annie was shocked that this snowball was only gaining momentum, not shrinking. And what hurt the most was that her husband was corroborating all these statements. "Eden, how can you make up such nonsense? You know it's all a lie, don't you? Had you been drinking that day?" She was indignant. "I'm sorry, but it's every man for himself," he smirked. His mother promised that when the money came out, she'd pay off his debts and there'd be money left over. And he is very tired of being afraid of creditors. It's not a joke, it's very scary. Besides, Erica, his beautiful Erica, with her chiseled figure, demanded to be supported. She had to become a mother of 3 children because her sister had failed in a multiple pregnancy and died in childbirth. Erica adopted the children, and now she needed care and investment in everything. Erica couldn't work and relied heavily on her businessman lover. "Honey, who else could I rely on but you?" She lied to her lovers. Erica was glad that Eden was naive enough to believe that she needed him. In reality, the 3 children were just a cover to nab money from all sorts of lovers. Amazingly enough, even the stingiest of rich men would splurge and shed a tear when she told him she couldn't leave the poor kids and would take care of them in memory of her sister. It was a good thing she had gotten the idea. At first, Erica wanted to give her nephews to an orphanage, but then once accidentally shared with one of her lovers that she was supposedly ready to adopt them, and was very surprised when he gave a large sum of money. Now Erica's life was better. There was enough money for a nanny, and outfits and beauty salons, still managed to save. And most importantly, she almost never saw the nasty, unhappy kids who were always yelling and wanting something. And it was also not a problem, because inherited from her late sister left an apartment. That's where the nanny took care of the kids, and Erica lived in her own home for her own pleasure. Eden was just one of the options. And of course he didn't know about it. And Erica didn't feel bad about deceiving him at all. A scoundrel is no better, he cheats on his wife too. "Only we have to be more careful, Bunny," she said. After editing. My wife must not find out anything, Eden told her. Once she started coming to his comfort room for a few hours, since he was paying well for the service, no one minded his business. Only one problem: his wife could still show up unexpectedly, and so they tried to meet late at night when no one was allowed into the hospital. Or early in the morning when they weren't allowed in yet. The wife introduced herself as a private nurse, and she didn't care that the other nurses and orderlies knew exactly why she was there. Let those honest, decent ones soak the last of their breadcrumbs in a glass of boiling water, and Erica was going to live a good life. And no one has the right to judge her. After all, she's even done her duty to her nephews. They're better off with a nanny anyway than they would be in an orphanage. And who organized all this? Their aunt. When they grow up, they'll be grateful to her. They don't even have to have children of their own. They'll have someone to provide for them in their old age. And having children is only spoiling your figure. You only have one youth. By the way, that Eden didn't really want children either. She didn't know why. He had mentioned that his father had some kind of mental illness. But that could have been his mother's idea. Erica had seen that old schemer. She's the kind of woman who'd lie without blinking an eye. She'd do anything for money. Meanwhile, unaware of the intrigue, Kate was on the mend and grateful to Damien for saving her life. The drifter didn't talk about the clouds thickening, and he didn't tell her about the unpleasant conversation he'd had with Annie's mother-in-law. "You know, my dear fellow, if you don't agree to give the money voluntarily, you'll go to jail for fraud," the short lady said to him haughtily. "But I didn't cheat anyone. She talked me into taking the money for the operation. Besides, I can prove that's what I spent it on." Damien was surprised. "Fraudsters like you know how to talk," the heiress said naively. Who would doubt it? Darcy was glad she'd copied that little freeloader's contact from her sister-in-law's phone in time. He was so scared. You just press him, and he's ready to go. "You know what? If there's a crook in here, it's you and your son. Annie's had enough. Why does she even put up with you?" The drifter was a tough nut to crack. "Now that we're talking, what do we have to say to the court? And that you're having an affair with my sister-in-law. So it's no wonder she fell for a seducer and a deceiver." Darcy told another lie. "Darcy, have you lost your mind? Do you realize what you're saying?" Damien was at a complete loss. "I know exactly what you're saying. Will you explain? The money will have to be returned. And where are you going to get it from?" "I don't care. By the way, Kate, whom you are so careful to protect, will not benefit if I have to tell her the whole truth." Annie's mother-in-law pressed on a painful point. "You're so mean." Damien wanted to punch the scheming woman, but she was old enough to be his mother. So he just clenched his fists and ran out of the foyer where she'd caught him. Eden was meeting with his mistress at the same time, and this time he made an exception by scheduling the meeting at lunchtime. His wife seemed to be at work today. She definitely couldn't make it. Eden knew full well that under the personal contract they had made, divorce could and should follow after one party cheated. It wasn't in his best interest at all, especially now when he and his mother had already done a lot of work and were getting closer to success than he had hoped. "My little birdie will be married soon. Then we can appear together in restaurants, theaters, wherever you want," he told Erica, who sat on his lap, wrapped in his arms. "Why?" "You don't love your wife," Erica pouted. She didn't need to marry the jerk, but he was so cooperative when he felt guilty. That's why she'd always pretended that she was in the mood for a serious relationship. "Yeah, she is. I'm sick of her." But Eden suddenly froze, stunned. He saw his wife, who had entered the room silently and was now looking at him with contempt. There were tears in her eyes. It was like a ghost who had come to avenge his betrayal. "Who did you see in there?" "Oh, you have such a funny face." Erica turned around and realized that it was apparently the very wife she had been carefully hiding from. She glared at the couple she'd caught and promptly ran away. She didn't want to get involved in Eden's marital squabbles. What was that supposed to mean? Annie realized how stupid a question she was asking, but it just came out of her mouth. "Yeah, the nurse was harassing me, and I'm sick, so I couldn't fight her off. I'm so glad you came," her husband tried to lie. "You know what? You're not going to get away with this," Annie slapped him. And caught up with Erica, who instantly revealed that she and Eden had been dating for a long time. Erica even showed a text message from a year ago and said that if her husband was cheating, it wasn't the mistress' fault. Annie agreed with her and decided that she wouldn't talk to her husband for the time being. She had to think things over. Eden had been calling her all day, and she had blacklisted his number for the time being. At the same time, the tireless mother-in-law went out to Emily, Annie's half-sister, and started doing some political work with her. "Have you ever thought that, however hypothetically, my sister-in-law might have a claim on your father's business?" It had never occurred to Emily before, but she really didn't like the idea. "What do you suggest?" she asked Darcy. "I just want to accomplish my goal and somehow get my sister-in-law to get the money. I thought you might be my ally. Do you know any secrets?" Annie's mother-in-law was honest. "You know, there is one secret, and it is very serious." Emily suddenly said, and told the family secret. It turned out that Annie was not the daughter of the man she thought her father was. After her father's death, Emily found the DNA test report. But she and her mother decided not to rake up the past because of the small amount of money Annie received. But if it could be about a half-sister claiming the business, that really was another matter. Emily thought to protect herself. She had never loved Annie, after all, and it was time to put an end to even hypothetical claims on the deceased's estate. Why did your father keep it all in the safe and say nothing? Darcy wondered. From her point of view, she shouldn't have spent the money to help a girl who wasn't her own. She could not understand the dead man's logic. I don't know that. But you can make it look like Annie knew she had no right to the inheritance. And yet she got it. So you get your money. And I'll make sure the so-called sister never gets more. I have a bigger share, Emily summarized. Darcy was delighted. At first she was afraid Emily would demand the money back. But she didn't seem to have any claim to the modest sum by their family's standards. And she'd even come up with a good idea to make her sister-in-law look bad in court. She was certainly lucky she'd thought to speak to Emily. When Darcy had triumphantly announced the trump card up her sleeve and asked Annie one last time to volunteer the rest of the money so as not to embarrass herself, she had agreed surprisingly easily. Darcy was even surprised that the victory had come effortlessly, but she greedily snatched the bag of money. It all worked out. For some reason, Emily didn't tell me that my father wasn't related to me. Annie asked the woman she'd thought was her half-sister all along. I don't know, I just didn't want to talk to you again. When your mother-in-law said you could claim the business, it was just insurance. Emily didn't feel guilty. So what if she was protecting herself? Any reasonable person would have done the same thing. Then why did your father take care of me? Annie insisted. She wanted to know the whole truth. Mother said your real father was his best friend. Then he died and asked me to take care of his family. Like a dying request, Emily said tiredly. She didn't feel like having all this silly, sentimental talk. Emily liked to live in the moment. Wait. But caring is one thing. Why did he marry my mom? Annie wondered. Oh, you're such a nerd. Your mother cheated on her first husband, your real father. She had an affair with my father. And he thought you were really his daughter for a while. And then I guess the truth came out. Why are we even bringing up the past right now? Emily really couldn't understand what it would do to Annie now. You know, I want to understand the man I thought was my father, and the real one too. She asked Emily to mail her a picture of her real dad and everything she knew about him. She was hardly surprised to see a dark-haired, balding man with clear blue eyes. She'd seen him before in a photograph her mother had carefully kept in a secret drawer. And no matter how many times Annie asked her, "Who is that, Mom?" never answered. Only then she'd lock herself in the bathroom and cry. It all made sense now. So her mom was confused about her feelings and left the man she loved for the one she had a passion for. She regretted it later, but it was too late. Apparently she felt guilty that Annie's own father died on one of her dangerous business trips. He was a helicopter pilot, a rescue worker. His sweetheart broke his heart, cheated on him with his best friend. So he lost his temper in a helicopter accident. And before he died, he gave his friend his blessing to be happy with his wife. I wonder if he knew his mom was expecting a child from him. There's no way of knowing now, Annie thought. Emily gave Annie all of her father's letters to her mother. Everything she could learn there was part of the mystery. In those short lines was the whole life and drama of two people who had gone on a treasonous affair and couldn't forgive themselves for it. Emily was wrong to say that it wasn't worth digging into the past. Annie needed to figure out who she was and why. And to do that, she needed to look into her parents' history. From now on, she would visit both her father's graves and, of course, her mother's. "Dad, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were suffering. Thank you for taking care of us anyway," Annie said at her named father's grave. Suddenly, a voice sounded behind her back. "Annie, it's you. I'm so glad to see you. You know, your mother-in-law seems to have a conscience. She called me and said she wasn't bothering me anymore. I wasn't worried about me, but I felt sorry for Kate. And that's you, guardian angel. You know, it's good to see you too." Annie offered to have tea in his apartment and told me the whole story. So you've lost all your money because of me? Upset buddy. No, I didn't. Thanks to you, I've become wiser. Well, I also realized the meanness of my husband and mother-in-law. I learned more about my own father, and for all that I paid a small price for something that didn't belong to me. And I also managed to help a good man survive, she summarized. In your interpretation, it wasn't sad at all. So you will start your life with a clean slate. Don't be angry with me, Damien asked. No, of course not. I even thought maybe we could meet in some other setting since I'm getting a divorce anyway. Annie was very embarrassed. She didn't know how to tell Damien that she liked him. He would never, ever think of courting her himself, though she sensed that he had already fallen in love with her. You know, I'd be very happy to. I've missed you. Honestly, I didn't think you'd be interested. I'm a drifter. Dust. Nothing, Damien said, embarrassed. That's what you thought before, but that's about to change. Will you be my knight? Would you like me to initiate you? She took the penknife from the table, the one he'd once used to cut the belt on the seat and save her. And Damien, who himself had said he loved books about knights, knelt before her, tears welling up in his eyes. It was all very serious for him. So, a former vagrant and a troublemaker. A waste of space. You've always been a knight and a good man. And I'm just letting you be a knight, even though you've been one for a long time. She touched his forehead and shoulder in a non-joking way. To her, it was as if that knife was sacred. It was with it that Damien had freed her from death, and then from her despicable surroundings. Damien wrapped his arms around her knees and pressed himself against them. Never had he been so happy. The woman of his dreams had come and told him he was free from a dark past and loneliness. He believed her. It's a good thing you decided to get married, Kate said when Damien told her he'd found the one he'd spend the rest of his life with. I hadn't proposed yet. We just started dating, Damien corrected her. You two are definitely going to be together. I can sense these things. When I worked at the orphanage, I knew who was getting married and who was going to split up. Your Annie's a good woman, but there's something else you need to know. Kate said that Annie's mother-in-law did come to her to argue. The name and surname of the deceased who left the inheritance seemed familiar even then. And she remembered that this deceased was the birth father of Damien, whom he had once brought back. How is this so? My father had given up on me from the word go. And it didn't work out that the deceased wasn't such a bad man. And then suddenly it turns out that he abandoned his own son and forgot. Damien marveled. Don't judge him harshly. You see, he was young and green then, and he grew up in a very poor, dysfunctional family. His girlfriend died in childbirth, so he was sure you'd be better off here than with him. I was young too when he brought you, but I remember. He yelled something about how you were the reason his beloved died. He thought you brought him bad luck. He didn't want to see you. I'm sorry I'm telling you all this. But you know, it's better to know the truth. The same man can be a good father to his stepdaughter and a bad father to his own son. And it wasn't my fault. At least now I understand why I always felt unwanted in this world. But that was before I met Annie, Damien admitted. Did you ever think that you could make things right? You're entitled to an inheritance, aren't you? I could help you find all the necessary documents, Kate asked. She wanted to thank this nice young man for saving her. No, my father didn't want me. I don't want his inheritance. Don't think I'm judging him, but I want a fresh start, Damien said. Well, you've always been like that. You've always lived by your heart. I think you should stay that way. You're a rare man. Annie's like that too. And you'll be happy, Kate said. And she cried. She asked me to make sure she was invited to the wedding. Of course you're like my mom, Damien promised. They kept their promise and indeed invited Kate to a modest ceremony. And when you baptize the kids, you'll invite her too. I can babysit them, by the way. I've always wanted to be a grandmother. Oh, I don't know about the kids. I hope everything works out, Damien replied. Annie had already shared her worries with her husband that she couldn't get pregnant. But he said that a family without children was sacred too, so she calmed down. About a month later, she came across a newspaper. Journalists described in great detail that another car had fallen off the bridge. This time a woman was killed. The man was left disabled and would never walk again. He also suffered a concussion. Erica and Annie's ex-husband were pictured. It says here that the boys of my husband's mistress have been put in an orphanage. And there are no other relatives, Annie said sadly. Don't you want to become a mom of many children? I've always dreamed of it. All we need are orphanages. A big family, Damien suddenly suggested. But we're not that rich, said Annie. That's not what makes us happy. Don't you get it yet? Damien asked and looked at her with his kind eyes the color of the sky. Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to be a mom. The adoption went through very quickly. Kate pulled up her connections. She said Volland and Vincent were wonderful kids. She's the one who knows about babies. Now you're going to have your own. I know I do, the wise woman said. Though Damien and Annie didn't believe her at first, a couple years later they had a baby girl who looked like both parents at the same time. Darcy tried to save her son, but when she learned that he would remain an invalid, she gave him to an institution with a broken heart. A free one, of course. Her son didn't understand anything now anyway, and she could really use the money. So she thought. I was right. When I lost the ability to walk 6 months later, I had to hire a nurse. Of course she wasn't. She saw a secure old age, still counting on her former daughter-in-law. After all, her husband studied and began to earn a decent income, a house full of money. Maybe there would be a corner for her. Alana turned off the bedroom light. Time to go to bed, she thought. Tomorrow would be a day off, so she could stay in bed longer. But it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning and her eyes were getting sleepy. I can't wait to get under the covers. In her head flashed only one thought. The woman watched her favorite TV series, and here she could not tear herself away. There was everything: love, betrayal, and a difficult period in the main character. All this was so reminiscent of the fate of Alana. The series, as it should, ended with a happy ending. It was clear from the very beginning. In such movies, it could not be otherwise. And in Alana's life, anything could happen. However, the circumstances were such that now she is doing well. I can't believe it sometimes. How great it all turned out in the end. She smiled at the thought that Alana's life was as if it had been scripted by the director of all those TV shows. It all started many years ago, and at the start of her life, young Alana was faced with a lot of adversity and loss. Her childhood came in memories only vaguely. Only sensations and images remained in her memory. Her father, strong and reliable, often carried her daughter on his strong shoulders. The girl adored these moments. And fun, and a little scary to look at the world from such a height, thought Alana, feeling the support of her father's hands. Her mom was like a warm hug, kisses, with a gentle voice, her face so high it was lost in a haze. Alana couldn't remember mom's features. They were blurring and slipping away. But amazingly, for some reason, Alana could still clearly see her mother's dress in front of her, turquoise with small black polka dots. And then her parents were gone. Everything happened suddenly. A fire in the dormitory, caused by a cigarette butt left on the sofa, took the lives of young students. Luckily, Alana stayed at a 24-hour daycare center that night. She remembered longing for her family. First she cried, then she was angry at her mom and dad. Why don't they come? Why don't they pick me up like they used to? The nanny, as best she could, tried to explain to the 3-year-old girl what had happened. What had happened? Alana was very small then, but she still remembered her feelings: fear, despair, and for some reason rage. The girl was about to be sent to an orphanage, and the paperwork was already being processed when her Aunt Alex, her father's sister, suddenly showed up. Alex lived in the village, single-handedly raising 2 daughters, and she didn't really need Alana. Brother and sister did not communicate much, but relatives of Alan's father persuaded Alex, saying that it would be wrong if the girl would grow up in an orphanage when her aunt was alive. As a result, Alex's aunt, for whom the opinion of people was very important, sheltered her niece. Alanino's childhood was not a happy one. Aunt Alex was not happy about the extra mouth, but she fulfilled her duties: dressed, fed, and brought up Alana. She sent her niece to school on time, kept her busy, and taught her household skills. But the aunt's attitude toward her own daughters was different. She looked at them with love and tenderness, bought sweets for them with her last money, and dressed them up in clean dresses. Alanina's wishes were not taken into account. She received old clothes, after her cousins. When they fidgeted in front of the mirror, her aunt smiled, calling them beauties and photo models. Alana, trying to get approval, did the same, but heard in her address a completely different assessment. That's the same monkey screams. All in the mother went, would not have been a case to do. So trying to be inconspicuous and not to attract attention to herself, Alana became more and more withdrawn. To prove to Alex that she had not taken her niece in vain, and that she could be of use to her, became an urgent task for Alana. From an early age, she realized that no one would love her just for her pretty eyes. Recognition and respect had to be earned. Dreaming of independence, after finishing 9 grades of village school, Alana decided that it was time to act. She applied to the college, as continuing her school education and entering a university seemed something impossible. You need to get a profession as soon as possible and become independent, Aunt Alex reasoned, frankly expressing the idea that university was not an option for Alana. Once you get a specialty, you'll start earning your own money, Auntie persuaded, not hiding her thoughts that it was time for Alana to think about a future outside the village. The phrase "you're a hula face" had been said to her, but despite that, Alana felt she had grown up to be a pretty girl. She saw her reflection and noticed traits in herself that set her apart from her cousins. Alana realized more and more how much she resembled her mother, who had also grown up in an orphanage. Alana knew little about her maternal relatives, but she thought that perhaps they would have accepted her differently, better than Aunt Alex. Modest and quiet, Alana did not spend her evenings with boys or go dancing, but she still found admirers in the village. By the age of 16, she was being courted by local boys, which was a surprise to the girl and perhaps proof that she had something special that attracted attention to her. Alana decided that before building a personal life, she wanted to achieve professional independence and feel more confident in her own abilities. She did not seek an early marriage, for she had dreams of a strong family and a loving husband, and she realized that to realize these dreams, she had to become independent first. After high school, Alana went to the city and soon began to live an independent life. She was full of ambition and desire to achieve independence. City life seemed confusing to her at first, but over time Alana adapted to it, rejoicing in her relative independence from her aunt. At the age of 20, Alana proudly received a degree in food technologist, but soon faced the realities of adult life when she realized that without work experience it would be difficult to find a job in her specialty. After graduation, the state support stopped, and the girl had to look for any job to support herself. Alana started looking for work actively, not neglecting even low-skilled jobs, such as a cleaner in the housing and utilities department, because she had to survive somehow. The job was hard and poorly paid, but the offer of a room under the stairs was a lifeline, even though it only provided her with shelter and a minimal means of subsistence. Nevertheless, Alana didn't give up, continuing to look for a better job where she could use her knowledge and get paid accordingly. She went to many interviews, carefully presenting her red diploma to potential employers, but to no avail until one day she was lucky. Alana came to one interview at a beverage company with the hope that she would finally be able to start a career in her profession and prove to herself and everyone around her that she could break the stereotype of a young professional with no experience and succeed. She saw a vacancy in the newspaper and decided to try her luck. Already in the first minutes of the interview, the girl realized that she would not be taken. The employee of the personnel department, it seemed, communicated with Alana for a tick. Maybe she was fulfilling some recruitment plan or creating the appearance of work. I immediately guessed that she wouldn't be hired here as a technologist. And then he entered the office, Kevin, a tall man in jeans and a plain black t-shirt under which I could see strong muscles. You could tell he played some kind of sport or went to a gym. He had a sense of strength and self-confidence. He looked like a Hollywood actor, slightly mocking eyes, white teeth, a smile, charming dimples on his cheeks. The man was about 15 years older than Yana. The girl, without wanting to, looked at him. Then she realized and looked away. It was not enough that he noticed her involuntary admiration. He'd think she was a fool. But Kevin noticed. He winked cheerfully at Alana and turned to the human resources lady. "Who's this young, lovely creature who's applying for the technologist position? But she's not a good fit. She has no experience at all, and her specialty is not the same. It's hard to find a job for young people without experience." The man shook his head, looking at Alana with interest. "It's hard for them. What about the secretary position?" I need a new assistant right now. She's young, quick, energetic, and she's got the right looks, which is important for our image. We wanted to transfer a technician to this place from the energy department, reminded the personnel officer. Let's put the girl on probation. Something tells me she can handle it, Kevin said, winking at Alana. He grabbed a file from his desk and left the office. Without expecting it, Alana had become a secretary. The job was not difficult, and the girl was quickly brought up to speed. She was required to answer the phone and record messages for the boss when he was absent from work. Also, Alana had to prepare coffee for Kevin's visitors and treat them while they were waiting for their turn in the reception area. The salary offered to the girl was such that she couldn't even believe her luck. With this money, she could rent a nice apartment, eat well, and buy herself nice outfits. She could even save a little every month. But all of this kept Alana's mind at ease. Her new responsibilities, her co-workers, and the chic surroundings of the reception area where she worked now were very different from the dirty driveway cleaning she'd been doing recently. But Alana enjoyed her interactions with Kevin. He turned out to be very kind, understanding, and fun. Her boss treated her well, praised her performance, complimented her, and discussed work issues. Alana didn't notice how she fell in love. It was probably her first and immediately strong love. She couldn't imagine life without this man. The object of her secret love was Kevin, of course. But Alana knew he was married to the beautiful and intelligent Cynthia and had 3 wonderful sons. Trying to condemn herself for these feelings, she couldn't escape her sincere emotions. But she realized that this situation had no future. She shouldn't be a nuisance in someone else's family. After convincing herself over the weekend, Alana decided to end her reverie. Over the weekend, Alana got used to the idea that there was nothing she and the chief could have in common. But on Monday, once again seeing his smile and eyes with a sly squint, the girl again ceased to control herself. She was dreaming, daydreaming for real. She wanted Kevin to hug her, to kiss her, to hold her close. Alana would be the happiest person in the world. One evening, Kevin invited Alana into his office. It was late. The co-workers had dispersed. The boss was preparing for an upcoming audit and stayed late to look over the reports. Alana was required by regulation to stay in her office as long as the boss was at work. Kevin rarely stayed late, once every couple or 3 months at most. That's when he did too. "Alana, I need to talk to you straight," the man began as Alana sat down in the visitor's chair. The girl tensed up. Maybe the chief had some complaints about her work. Suddenly he would offer her to write a letter of resignation. Where else would she find such a job? "We've had you for 6 months. You're a good girl, you're a good worker. But I realized not too long ago that it's not just those qualities that attract me to you," Kevin continued, looking Alana straight in the eye and speaking in a quiet, calm voice. Thinking about what had happened, Alana was already feeling a little dizzy. Her heart was pounding frantically in her chest and a chill appeared in her stomach, just like before exams. "I think you have some feelings for me too." "I'm right," Kevin said, looking at Alana point blank and waiting for an answer. How could the girl deny the obvious? Yes, of course she did. She'd been in love with the chief for a long time, tried not to show her feelings, thought she was succeeding well. But no, Kevin, it turns out, understood everything. Later, many years later, Alana looked at the situation with different eyes. Kevin had pressured her, creating the illusion of a choice, even though the decision had been determined in advance. Kevin is a rich, powerful man, handsome, mature, successful. She is a young girl, completely dependent on him. Kevin clearly understood how important the job and the paycheck were to Alana. He skillfully manipulated young girls, making them lose their heads to him. However, the realization of all this came much later. In those days, it seemed that fate generously rewarded her. The girl couldn't even believe her luck. Kevin paying attention to her was unbelievable. She loved him and was willing to do anything for him. "Yes, you're right. I have feelings for you too," Alana admitted, blushing. She herself didn't understand why she suddenly felt so vulnerable. "Then I'm not wrong," the man smiled. "Let's make a deal first. Let's stop replacing each other. Second, I really want to spend more time with you. So I suggest right now we have dinner at a restaurant somewhere. How about it?" Alana shrugged. She wasn't yet used to the idea of Kevin himself proposing a relationship to her. It seemed unbelievable. At that moment, the girl had completely forgotten about her boss's wife and his 3 sons. It all seemed unimportant. The main thing was Kevin, who looked at her with tenderness and admiration, smiled and invited her to dinner. "I'm probably not dressed for a restaurant," Alana finally said. There was no dress code in the company. Everyone wore what they wanted to wear. On this day, Alana came to work in jeans and a t-shirt. If she had known in advance, she would have worn one of her favorite dresses, which she now had plenty of thanks to her good salary. Alana, Victor smiled. "You don't understand anything, and you don't even realize how gorgeous you look in those jeans of yours." "It's just adorable," Kevin said with a smile. They did go to a restaurant that evening. It was the first time Alana had been in the cabin of the chief's expensive foreign car, and it was the first time she had been to a restaurant too. The girl felt a little confused at first. She didn't know how to behave and what to say. She was afraid of looking rude and ignorant in front of Victor. But gradually the man did the seemingly impossible with his jokes and compliments. He dispelled her stiffness. She did not notice how she began to communicate with him simply and sincerely. Kevin wanted to know everything about her, and she told him everything about her cold childhood, about her difficult years of study and her work as a janitor. Kevin looked at her seriously and silently, without interrupting, catching every word she said. "Yeah, you've had a hard life," he said when Alana was done. "Life hasn't spoiled you, but you're with me now, and things will be different." Alana smiled. She believed this strong, powerful man unconditionally. Finally, she felt secure and unfamiliar, but so pleasant feeling. Later, they kissed for a long time in Kevin's car. Alana was dizzy from his embrace and kisses, loving his warmth and touch and responding eagerly. But suddenly, Kevin said it was time to leave. He drove her home and kissed her gently on the cheek goodbye. "You don't look good here." He looked around, surveying his surroundings. "We'll figure something out." From then on, their story began. At work, they didn't advertise their relationship, although Kevin could occasionally smile, especially at Alana in front of all the co-workers, and even compliment her. Soon it was known to everyone. It was making Alana a little tense, but no one said anything to her face. People valued their places and held on to them. Probably that's why no one wanted to ruin the relationship with the chief. Before Alana knew it, Kevin had become everything to her. She didn't need anyone else, just to be near him. To hear his voice, to inhale the scent of her favorite person, to feel the beating of his heart. Alana was ready to dissolve in him, to do for him everything he wanted. When they didn't see each other for a long time, it happened occasionally. Kevin would go on a long business trip or go on vacation with his family. Alana couldn't eat anything. She melted before her eyes and stopped caring about anything. Books were not read, TV series were not watched. The girl counted the days and even hours until she met her beloved. It was like an addiction. Kevin patronized Alana. He liked to surprise and please her. The man was not stingy with gifts, expensive jewelry, brand-name clothes, shoes, certificates to spas. Every time he came up with something new. Kevin rented a luxurious apartment for Alana in the city center, spacious, bright, stylishly furnished. Sometimes he stayed overnight, and in those moments Alana felt especially happy. She imagined they were husband and wife. She didn't have to share him with anyone. And she didn't have to hide either. One thing marred the happiness: Kevin had a family, and that fact was impossible to ignore. The man, without noticing it himself, often told Alana something about his children or his spouse. They were mostly funny and sweet stories. The man loved his boys and had great respect for his wife. Did he love her? Alana couldn't answer that question for herself, and Kevin didn't dare ask. No, they often talked about frank topics, but here Alana was afraid to hear a positive answer. What if Kevin really loved his wife? And she, Alana? Just a passing fancy. And yet Alana felt that Kevin took her very seriously. He may have planned a brief affair with the young secretary at the beginning of the relationship, but then it turned out that they were very good together. Despite the difference in age and social status, "You understand me like no one else," Kevin confessed more than once, looking at Alana. "I feel so good with you, and so relaxed, my soul rests." It's such an amazing feeling to realize that there's someone who accepts you with all your strengths and weaknesses. Kevin was right. Alana did love him with some kind of unconditional love. Even if Kevin had committed some horrible act or crime, it wouldn't have changed Alana's attitude towards him. 10 years flew by unnoticed. Alana and Kevin grew closer during that time. They occasionally flew together on vacations. Kevin would make out a business trip at work and take Alana with him. Those were wonderful days: the sea, the beaches, the incredible beauty of nature. And it was just the two of them, with no other eyes and ears. Alana wondered more than once if Kevin knew that her husband had a mistress for a long time. It was unlikely that she was still in the dark. The woman didn't seem naive or stupid. One day, Alana dared to ask Kevin about it. "Don't worry," he smiled, stroking Alana's hair. "She and I have a loose relationship. We don't stress each other with jealousy and control. Cynthia, just like me, is free to do whatever she wants." Alana couldn't understand it. She explained to herself that this relationship between the couple was not a marriage of love, but of convenience. Kevin and Cynthia's parents were big businessmen who had decided to pool their capital and invest it in their children. There wasn't much love between the couple. Alana liked to think so. It was somehow comforting and gave her hope that when Kevin's children grew up and became independent, he could finally divorce his wife to make her, Alana, his lawfully wedded wife. Alana was no longer the young, inexperienced 20-year-old secretary who had agreed to have an affair with her boss. She was well into her 30s, but she was still naive, perhaps even worldly stupid. It seemed to her, though, that sooner or later Kevin would marry her. 2 more years passed, and then one morning Alana realized she couldn't get out of bed. She felt sick, nausea rising to her throat at the slightest movement. At that moment, the woman guessed that a miracle had happened. It looked like she was expecting a baby. Despite the fact that she and Kevin were very careful, no method of contraception gives 100% results. And here's the result. Despite not feeling well, Alana suddenly felt happy. Her soul felt warm and clear. She still got out of bed and got to the pharmacy where she bought the test. Alana was afraid that she was wrong, but the test did not disappoint. 2 bright stripes showed that she had a baby under her heart. Before talking to Kevin, Alana was hardly worried at all. Yes, he'd said more than once that he didn't want any more children, but she didn't think Kevin wouldn't be happy when he found out about the baby. He loved her so much, cared for her so tenderly, showered her with compliments and gifts. Wouldn't he be happy to hear that they were going to have a baby soon? Alana has been dreaming of a baby for so long, envying moms with strollers. And now she's going to have a baby too. Finally, a son or a daughter, whatever. Kevin, however, frowned when he heard the news. "Alana, we had a deal." There was an accusing tone in his voice. "I don't know how it happened," Alana said, surprised at herself. She had already realized that Kevin was not happy about the baby, but she was still hoping to change his mind. She wanted him to share her joy and excitement, to tell her that everything would be all right. But it wasn't. Kevin stood his ground. He didn't want a child, and the only way out was to terminate the pregnancy. Children out of wedlock were out of the question. Alana cried, begged Kevin to come to his senses, and for the first time in their 12-year relationship, she was angry with him. How dare he suggest she get rid of her long-awaited, wanted child? "I love you, I love what we have. But the baby doesn't. I have a right to decide that too." "No, you don't." Alana slammed the door and stormed out of the apartment Kevin had rented for her. She ran out into the night, wherever she could see. The woman wasn't afraid to stay on the street. She had a cell phone and had accumulated a small fortune over the years. She and her child would have enough for the first time, and then Alana would find a job and things would get better. "I won't betray you, my little one," Alana said to her daughter. Yes, to her daughter. Alana realized what was waiting for the girl the moment she ran away from home. Alana quit her job at Kevin's company and rented a small apartment on the outskirts of town where rent was cheaper. Kevin called often, but every time she answered, she thought he'd come to his senses. But no, he was still insistent he wanted Alana back, but he was urging her to get rid of the baby. Alana was nervous, under tremendous stress every day. She dreaded the future. She couldn't find a job and now had no one to lean on. Alana had grown accustomed to Kevin, to his sensitivity, attention, tenderness, support. He playfully solved all the problems that arose and with a few words lifted Alana's mood. And now Kevin had become alien and inaccessible. Alana felt their connection breaking, and it was almost physically painful. Sometimes she even thought about doing what Kevin wanted her to do, get rid of the baby and go back to her old life. But those thoughts quickly faded. No, Alana would have this baby, give birth to it, and raise it. She could handle it. She had wanted to be a mother for so long. However, despite Alana's best efforts, she was unable to keep the pregnancy going. Worries, constant stress, and nerves, all this together led to a tragic result. Alana curled up right on the street. The pain was such that her eyes went black. She thought she was going to faint. Someone called an ambulance. Alana was taken away from the store, on whose porch she was curled up in pain. The woman was ready to endure any agony as long as her baby was saved. But something told her that nothing would work. There was still hope, but it was very weak and ghostly. In the hospital, on a cold couch, indifferent eyes of doctors, and a voice that said terrible words for Alana clean. There's nothing left to save. Then Alana lay in a room surrounded by other women who were still pregnant. The doctors had saved their babies, and being among themselves, the expectant mothers discussed their babies. Each of them was sure that all threats were over and their babies would be born. Alana, on the other hand, was no longer hopeful. At the first round, the doctor shocked Alana with the news. He told her that she would probably never become a mother again. Your case is complicated. This was about saving your life. You should know that it is unlikely you will be able to have a natural birth. But the doctors added that there are options, as medicine does not stand still. Alana didn't listen. Further, she fell into the abyss of despair and fear. Was her biggest dream not going to come true? Would no one ever call her mom? What was there to live for? Kevin met Alana at the hospital. How did he know what had happened? Alana was surprised, but not really surprised. She didn't feel much at all at that moment. She was going to go to the apartment she'd rented, but Kevin had taken her home, to the place where she'd lived for years, and was happy. "Stop fooling around," Kevin said. "Get back here. We'd already made a mess of things." Alana didn't care. It took her a long time to come back to life. At first she even ate, but only because Kevin forced her to. She wanted nothing more than a couch and a pillow. Alana blamed herself for not keeping the baby safe. Kevin carried some of the blame too. At first she thought it was his fault. But he had tried so hard. Kevin had turned into a sensitive and considerate man again. He cooked her favorite meals for Alana, watched TV shows with her, cared as much as he could. It was very touching. Kevin seemed genuinely sorry for what had happened. I reevaluated the situation and realized that I was being selfish. "I'm sorry, let's start over. This time I'll be more attentive to your wants and needs. The doctors said you were between life and death. It's scary to think that I might have lost you." Gradually, Alana melted away. She accepted the current state of affairs. After all, the world wasn't about children. Many people nowadays consciously choose childlessness. Besides, she had a loving and sensitive man by her side. And Alana decided to stay happy, no matter what. And it worked. Kevin and Alana began to travel more. For the next 2 years, they traveled almost all over the world. They climbed mountains, bobbed on ocean waves, crossed the desert in jeeps. It was thrilling, exciting, and wonderful. The main thing is that Kevin was always there for us, protecting us, supporting us. His children were grown. They didn't need their father, and Cynthia hardly required his presence. Kevin spent more time with Alana, and she was delighted. But as time went on, things began to change. At first it was subtle, but then it became more and more noticeable. Kevin was suddenly incredibly busy, always working late, traveling for business, and when he was with Alana, he was in his own thoughts. He didn't compliment her anymore. He didn't ask her about the past day or share the events of his life. Alana panicked. She was used to having Kevin around, and it seemed to her that it would always be that way. They had been through so much together, but now something strange and frightening was happening. Kevin was clearly drifting away, and the process was gaining momentum. Alana hesitated to talk about it. She was no longer a naive girl, but her insecurities remained. Outwardly, Alana looked like a successful and contented woman, but it was only an appearance. She was afraid to hear honest answers to her questions, which could redefine her life. That's why she kept quiet. Kevin himself had once dared to have a serious conversation. That evening was forever etched in Alana's memory. Kevin arrived late when she was about to go to bed. Alana was glad because she missed him very much. She missed the companionship, the jokes, and even the funny jabs. Maybe it wasn't all that bad if Kevin was here. Maybe Alana was just getting herself worked up. Alana, this may be hard to accept right off the bat, but we need to break up. Alana felt like she'd been hit over the head. She fluttered her eyelashes and turned pale, and Kevin hastily pulled up a chair for her, afraid she would faint. Then the man talked at length about how happy he'd been with Alana for nearly a decade and a half, describing her virtues and assuring her that she had more to come. He explained that the relationship had simply exhausted itself. There was no longer that spark, passion, emotion. The same thing is happening to you. I can see it, Kevin said, but Alana thought he was wrong. It was incomprehensible to her. Kevin probably thought it was easier to believe that Alana's feelings had cooled too. Kevin talked a lot and persuasively, as he always did. Alana listened, sometimes nodding, answering something. She didn't cry, she didn't beg, she didn't argue. It was useless. Kevin had decided everything for the two of them. You could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice, read it in every gesture. I met someone else, and I had strong feelings for her. I didn't expect that to happen in my old age, Kevin admitted. Alana didn't cry, but she was dying inside. She realized that the old Alana was gone. Kevin was everything to her. She had no idea how to live without him, but he had made his choice, and nothing could stop it. The man couldn't hide a smile while talking about his new love. This is something incredible. Alana, you're going to have to leave my company. You're just going to quit. She'll be working here now. And you and I can't see each other all the time. It's going to be hard on both of you, and on me, of course. Alana nodded, barely holding back tears. I feel so bad about all this, Alana thought. It's going to be okay, Alana smiled, trying not to show how hard it was for her. She didn't want Kevin to feel sorry for her. Just not this. I'm sorry for what happened, but I've been honest with you. This is all very hard. I'll help you find another job. And you can stay in the apartment as long as you want until you find a new one, Kevin added. Thank you, Alana nodded. That was it. Alana's past life was over. She wouldn't stay in the apartment that held so many happy moments. The woman left for another city where nothing would remind her of Kevin. And it wasn't easy. They lived together for almost 15 years. And Alana got used to Kevin, to the joint life with him, thought it would last forever. But everything changed in an instant. Alana found an apartment in a new city thanks to her savings and started looking for a job. She faced a hard truth: it was not so easy to find a job in her specialty. Almost 15 years of working as a secretary did not give her a chance, because there were few suitable vacancies, and she could not do anything else really well. So Alana became a kitchen assistant at a local restaurant. Her job duties ranged from making sure the floors were clean to washing dishes and carrying pots. She did whatever was asked of her. Alana was always ready to work. The work was hard, and at the end of the day her back ached and her legs rang. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to rent a small apartment. And of course there was a nice bonus of taking home leftovers at the end of the day. For Yana, with her limited budget, this was really valuable. Did she miss her former life, a comfortable apartment, traveling, shopping in expensive stores? Probably not. Of course she was sad, but not for the lost prosperity that Kevin had provided. She missed Kevin himself, despite the way things had ended. Alana still loved him so much that even the thought of other men seemed impossible to her. Her friends advised her to get on with her personal life, but her heart wouldn't listen. Sometimes Alana imagined that something would happen to Kevin, that he would lose everything: money, business, house. Naturally, his new girlfriend would immediately leave him. Alana believed she was only with him for the money. As for Kevin's wife, Cynthia, she apparently didn't care about his adventures. Alana, unlike her, would forgive Victor anything and gladly take him back. But those were just fantasies. She was well aware of that. Time passed, and Alana's mental wounds healed, turning into scars. She lived alone, almost reaching her 40s, without children, without a husband, without a profession to be proud of. The absence of a loved one to care for, and who would care for her, was hard on Alana. The loneliness frightened her. Could she fall in love with someone else? There were no suitable candidates in her surroundings. After everything with Kevin, Alana realized that true love existed, and she could no longer settle for anything less. Alana couldn't bring herself to get over the separation. There were new joys in her life books. She became a frequent visitor to the local library. Alana absorbed the works, got acquainted with the inner world of the classics, and through the prism of events in their novels and stories, she rethought her fate. In her school years, Alana did not pay much attention to literature. All these works seemed boring to her, and she did not understand half of the words. However, apparently now it was the right moment for reading. In addition, Alana had a cat, Naomi, who turned out to be a very intelligent and affectionate animal. When Alana came home sad, Naomi would start rubbing against her legs, as if trying to comfort her. And when the mistress felt tired, the cat became inaudible and unnoticeable. One cold fall evening, Alana prepared a delicious dinner for Naomi from leftover red fish and beef scraps. She took something from the table for herself, too. I wondered how much food was left over after working in the kitchen. It turned out to be a decent savings on food. Alana buttoned her jacket up to her chin and pulled her hat over her ears. She didn't feel like going outside. The wind was making the windows shake, and it looked like it was going to rain. But staying at work overnight wasn't an option. Naomi, her favorite book, and the soft couch were waiting for her at home. It was cozy and warm, though very lonely. It wasn't that far to walk, only a couple of blocks. Alana had chosen an apartment near the restaurant, saving not only on food but also on transportation. It was already dark outside. The evening was almost pitch black. It felt like winter was approaching. Soon the snow would fall, and the streets would become bright and colorful, and the New Year mood would appear. But so far it was dirty and slushy, uncomfortable. In such weather, I wanted to be home sooner. The streets were deserted. No wonder, because the cold, nasty rain had started. The icy wind burned my cheeks. As she passed the playground, which in the darkness looked like the set of a horror movie, Alana hurried home. When she heard that voice, a weak, trembling voice that sounded desperate, "Help, please. I'm hungry," Alana stopped. It was very unexpected to hear a voice clearly belonging to a small child on the street in this weather. There were no adults around, and Alana didn't see the owner of the thin voice either. "Can you help?" A girl came out of the cabin of the wooden-colored ship that stood proudly in the playground. A little girl altogether. She looked no more than 5 years old, huge, frightened brown eyes, plump lips, beautifully arched eyebrows. Tangled strands of brown hair were poking out from under a stretched cap. The girl was wearing a gray boy's jacket, which was 2 sizes too big for her. On her feet she wore sneakers that were worn almost to the ground. All indications were that she came from a poor family. If she had a family at all, she probably should. Children don't happen by themselves or grow up in an orphanage, or close adults raise them. The girl looked at Alana studyingly, as if trying to figure out whether she was friend or foe. What are you doing here?" Alana finally said. "Sitting, walking down the street." Suddenly it started raining and the wind picked up, so I hid here. Where are your parents?" "My mom died and my dad disappeared somewhere. First we took a long train ride with him. The train was great, it was warm, the bed was clean, there was plenty of food. We were going to Grandma's, that's what Dad said. And then we got off the train. Daddy told him to wait for him and left, so I went to look for him. Only he was nowhere to be found." "Why did you leave? Daddy must have come back for you, but he didn't find you. Now he's worried, running around looking for his daughter." I waited a long time. The little girl shook her head. "We got here this morning. I had already left the station at night when it got dark." That did seem strange. Alana could understand if the man had left his daughter for a few minutes to, I don't know, go to the bathroom or drop off things at the luggage room. But according to the girl, she waited for her parent all day. "He left me." I guess the little girl sighed. "Daddy doesn't love me. It's Mom loved, but she died already. And Daddy, I heard him tell a friend of his that I was a burden to him." "So what are we going to do with you now?" Alana didn't know what to do. Leaving the girl out here in the cold wasn't an option. That was for sure. Dragging the child to the police wasn't an option either. The baby needed a good dinner and a warm bed right now. She'd have to sit on some chair all night at the station while they drew up a report, while they figured out where to put her, while they called the guardian or whoever they called in such cases. Let's go to my place now, Alana finally decided. We'll eat, watch TV. I have a cat, you can play with it. And tomorrow we'll go to the police. And the police uncles will decide what to do with you. The girl immediately tensed up. You don't have to go to the police. I haven't done anything wrong. Alana realized that the little girl was afraid of policemen for something. Most likely she had transferred such an attitude to law enforcement representatives from her parents. Perhaps they were doing something criminal. It's very likely. Normal people don't put their children in this situation. The cops are kind and good, Alana reassured the little girl. We'll ask them to find your daddy. Okay. Yes, the little girl nodded and added, I'm really hungry. Auntie, do you have any sausage at home? Alana's heart clenched with pity for this hungry, abandoned child. Somehow she reminded her of herself as a child, needed by no one, forgotten and abandoned by everyone. Alana held out her hand to the girl, who smiled and clung to it happily. Along the way, Alana and the girl got to know each other. She knew her name Emma, but she couldn't say her last name. That was strange for a rather small child of 5. Emma told a little about her life. At first, the little girl lived with her mom and dad somewhere in a village or on the outskirts of a small town. Her parents apparently drank. Emma mentioned noisy companies, fights, people falling asleep on the floor, including complete strangers. And in all of this, a small, defenseless child was growing up. Listening to Emma, Alana thought about how lucky she was to be in her aunt's family as a child. And she wasn't exactly loved and certainly not spoiled. But she'd never witnessed a scene like Emma's, either. Emma was taken to work almost every day. As Alana understood it, her parents would take her to the center of a small town and leave her at a crosswalk to beg for alms. Emma was given a lot. Of course they did for such a doll. Brown eyes alone. In general, Emma had a hint of oriental blood-dark skin, coal black eyelashes and eyebrows. She looked like a beautiful, expensive doll. And she was not cherished, not appreciated. Emma should go to kindergarten, wear smart dresses, play with her friends. She is so energetic, smart, curious. But the girl had to spend her days in a dark underpass and beg for change from passers-by. Didn't they hurt you there, Alana asked. Little could happen on the street to a small child? No, Emma shook her head. Everyone knew me in the crosswalk already, my uncle, the guitar player, and my aunt. She sold knitted socks in the crosswalk. And my dad often came to check up on me. In the evening, Emma's family returned home and went on as circumstances dictated. Sometimes Emma was left alone for a few days in an empty house. Her parents went out with someone. Other times, the company would gather at their place. Emma didn't know any other life, so she talked about everything that happened to her easily and casually. It was the norm for her. Meanwhile, Alana's hair was standing on her head in horror. What a lot of things had befallen a small child. And then Mommy died. Emma sighed. Daddy said it was bad vodka. And God saved him. He'd fallen asleep before that bottle was opened, so he survived. But Mom didn't sleep. So her friends got poisoned. Emma missed her mother very much. According to the girl, her parent loved her, treated her with candy, called her a beautiful princess, made beautiful ponytails. But sometimes she beat her, of course. It usually happened on days when Emma wasn't served enough. But if they served a lot, kissed and hugged, sang songs to her daughter and looked at her with kind eyes. Daddy's not like that. He never hugged me, and he never sang songs to me, and he never told me fairy tales. He doesn't love me, but still he's my daddy, and he takes care of me. Now he's lost or left me because he doesn't need me. They finally made it to Alana's apartment. You come on in, don't be shy. See, Naomi's meeting us, already missed you. Emma seemed to be in a normal apartment for the first time. Everything here seemed unusual, strange and wonderful to her. Simple things made the little girl really excited. Like the lamp on the wall or the toaster or the bathroom. Alana immediately filled it to the brim with warm water to wash the girl. Everything. Alana wrapped Emma in her robe and carried her little guest into the kitchen. Dinner from an expensive restaurant was already waiting for her. Here, grilled vegetables, chicken kebab, fruit. At the sight of this variety, Emma was even confused. Is this something you can eat? For me, she asked. You, Alana smiled. You should try it. It's really good. Emma greedily pounced on the food. It was immediately apparent that the little girl had been starved. And then Alana put Emma to bed in a makeshift bed made from 2 upholstered armchairs. She didn't have a second bed in the apartment. "I love it so much at your place," the sleepy little girl admitted. "May my daddy never be found at all. I want to stay with you." These words echoed warmly in Alana's heart. She was pleased that Emma liked it at her place. On the other hand, one should never get attached to the little girl. She'd have to go to the police with her tomorrow anyway. That's a shame. What a pleasure it is to take care of a child, to see its happy eyes, to open the world to it. I can't tell you how it feels. Even if only for one evening, but Alana felt like a mother of a wonderful girl. In the morning, she had to dress up the baby in her old dirty clothes. There were no other clothes. Alana asked for time off work and explained the situation. They were sympathetic and gave her advice on how to talk to the police so that they would not think that a kind woman had taken someone else's child. Alana was surprised. She had never even thought of such a possibility. At the station, Alana went to the duty officer and told him her story. He, surprised, looked at the 2 visitors with his eyes and called someone. Then he called the number of the office and let the woman with the child behind the desk. The young man in shoulder straps listened to her, then asked Emma a few questions before writing down Alana's details and suggesting she go home. What about the girl? Alana was no longer indifferent to Emma's fate, especially since the girl clung so trustingly to her hand. How is it to go and leave her here with strangers? The little girl's been through enough. "Can I take her? I promise I'll be in touch with you 24 hours a day, and I'll take the baby anywhere at the slightest need." The policeman shook his head negatively. You could see in his eyes that he'd love to help Alana and Emma, but he wasn't supposed to. "I want to take her away." The words came out of Alana's mouth before she could think. "To adopt her. If her parents can't be found, I'll take custody of the child, temporary, permanent, whatever, just so long as she's with me." "Are you sure?" The policeman looked at Alana in surprise. "More than sure. I don't want her in an orphanage or hospital. Let her go through all the necessary procedures at my place. I'll sign everything that needs to be signed. Certificates will be provided." "We'll keep that in mind." The policeman nodded and made some notes on the report. But Emma still had to spend about a month with strangers. First, she was admitted to the hospital in what was called the quarantine block. There, the girl was examined from top to bottom. It turned out that her health was excellent. Then Emma went to the orphanage. Alana visited the little girl almost every day. When Emma saw her, she would rush to her and hug her tightly. It was such a sweet moment. Alana always brought her some sweets or interesting toys. It was a joy to see the child's eyes light up with joy. All this time, Alana was preparing the documents for the adoption of the girl, collecting the necessary certificates, visiting the school of foster parents. She could not imagine that Emma would live with someone else. And the girl herself was drawn to Alana with all her soul. It's a pity that a 5-year-old's opinion won't be taken into account in court. If only she were 10. The search for Emma's father was not progressing. The orientation letters, interviews with possible witnesses, posters on the poles, and TV stories did not give any results. Emma's parents seemed to have fallen through the cracks. Alana was inclined to think that the little girl was right. The father had really abandoned his daughter, just left her at the train station in a strange city. A great plan if you want to never be found. Alana's adoption was going to be a problem. Single woman, no place of her own, low paycheck. Everything was looking up for Emma to be sent to an orphanage. Angry children, angry teachers of state rank. Alana could not imagine Emma, tender little Emma, in such conditions. Sure, the little girl had been through a lot in her 5 years, but she still had parents who took care of her as best they could. Yes, Alana realized that no one would really appreciate and love the girl in the orphanage. Her colleagues advised her to hire a lawyer specializing in such cases. The services of a professional cost a lot, but Alana even sold old jewelry, once given by Kevin, to pay for the work of a lawyer. The lawyer had to work hard, but in the end Alana received the court's opinion on Emma's adoption. For her, it was like a mountain had fallen from her shoulders. Now she and Emma would be together, and the girl would not end up in an orphanage. Alana immediately went to the orphanage to take Emma home. The girl even cried from joy, hugging Alana and saying that she would never come back here again. At home, Alana prepared everything for the arrival of the little girl: a new bed with linens, a closet with beautiful dresses, a desk. She fulfilled all the requirements of the guardianship authorities, creating a cozy and comfortable corner for Emma. And it gave Alana great joy to take care of the child, to choose toys and books for him. Alana's new life began. Emma turned out to be a wonderful child, perky, but able to keep herself in control, inquisitive and kind. She tried to take care of Alana, which moved the woman to tears. Alana had a family now, and she was happy. Emma finally went to kindergarten, where she immediately made many friends. The energetic, intelligent girl was always the center of attention. She invented games and activities that attracted children to her like a magnet. Alana couldn't get enough of her daughter. Emma didn't remember much about the past. It was as if she had decided to forget everything that had happened before she met Alana. And she had. Only sometimes she fidgeted restlessly in her sleep and soon calmed down. Probably all the same, in the subconscious remained some not too pleasant memories of life with her parents. But in the morning the girl could not say what she had dreamed. Alana was very careful to ask her about it, but she just shook her head. In due time, Emma went to school. And then it turned out that the girl has a great ability to do math. While others were solving simple examples, she, having coped with the obligatory part of the tasks, was studying Olympiad tasks for children a couple of grades older than herself. The teacher immediately recognized the talent of the little pupil and tried to develop it in every possible way. In middle school, Emma became interested in computer science and programming. Alana looked at her daughter and could not help but wonder how all these complex formulas and algorithms fit into the head of a 13-year-old. The woman herself was panicked by the sight of code, but Emma, with the keen look of a drummer, fingers on the keys, solved one complex problem after another. Emma became a prize winner of local and regional Olympiads more than once. Teachers believed that the girl had a great future. Alana was in solidarity with them. She was proud of her daughter and loved her very much. She was also worried about her daughter. Like any mother, this feeling was a bonus to the happiness of motherhood. There was no other way around it. Alana wondered how such a child could come from a family of marginalized people. These people abused booze, did not care about their daughter, did not engage in her development. The girl from an early age begged for alms in the underpass. Where did she get such abilities? It seemed strange to the woman. But there was no time to think about Emma's fate. Alana had to work even harder now. She wanted to dress Emma in beautiful, fashionable clothes, feed her daughter delicious and healthy food. She needed money for all that. So Alana did the best she could. It was hard to be alone, but the woman did not regret anything. On the contrary, she considered herself lucky. Fate had given her such a magnificent gift. It was an ordinary fall evening. Emma was already asleep with her hand under her cheek, just like when she was a child. Wow, how fast children grow up, Alana thought. 8 years had flown by. Emma had grown from a touching little girl into a beautiful young woman. Huge brown eyes, long shiny hair the color of melted chocolate. Slender, tall, dark-skinned. The admixture of Oriental blood gave the girl's appearance a special flavor. A beauty, and what a clever girl. Yes, nature had not been stingy, generously endowing Emma with everything at once. Alana smiled and returned to the laptop screen. The woman was trying to find the TV series she'd been told about at work. The search engine, as usual, produced a lot of unnecessary stuff. Alana was about to close the page, but then her eyes caught on a picture. The woman looked at it and could not believe her eyes. A teenage girl, slender, with long brown hair and a dazzling smile, posed in a bright pink swimsuit on the ocean. The wind ruffled the young beauty's hair. Behind her, the waves splashed, and it was Emma. The same facial features, the same smile, even the proportions of her figure were the same. But how is that possible? Her girl had never been to the sea. There's the ocean, white sand, palm trees. The longer she looked at this girl, the more she was surprised. The teenager didn't just look like her daughter. This was Emma. I could even see the mole on her thigh. Emma had one just like it, she thought. Alana pulled away from the screen and took a few deep breaths. This couldn't be a coincidence. Gathering her wits, Alana clicked on the photo. It opened the social network of one Nikita Gortsev. Apparently the girl was his daughter. On the page of this stranger there were more photos. Some of them had Sonia, so the name of the young beauty, posing against the ocean. Alana wasn't good at Russian, but she could understand it from the captions on the pictures. The family lived in a large and beautiful house, traveling. Father, mother, and daughter Sonia were a happy family. Sonia, who looked uncannily like Emma, attracted attention with her exotic beauty. The mixture of blood had a spectacular result. Alana could not take her eyes off Sonia, because the girl was an exact copy of Emma. Sonia's father apparently worked in the field of technology, as evidenced by the photos on his page. Interestingly, Emma also had a knack for programming. Alana made up her mind. She sent Nikita a letter in English without translating it through translators, attaching a few photos of Emma. In the letter, she told her girl's story. It could have all been a coincidence, but something told Alana that such coincidences simply do not happen. Nikita replied right away. He thanked Alana and asked her to stay in touch. He wrote that he couldn't tell her everything yet, but he wanted to meet her and was even ready to come to America for that. He was going to do it as soon as possible. Alana answered him and turned off her computer. What had just happened? Why did she immediately, without thinking about the consequences, wrote Nikita this letter? What would happen now? Alana's heart clenched with icy anxiety. She wanted to rewind time and not send a stranger from the internet that letter. But Alana had always acted in her daughter's best interests, believing that every decision she made would only benefit Emma. And this time Alana did the same, guided by her concern for Emma's future. The adoptive mother tried to give her daughter everything she could, but there was often not enough money for participation in competitions and tournaments, for traveling and new impressions. The possibility that a wealthy programmer from Moscow, who seemed to have some connection with the fate of Emma, could take part in the girl's life seemed unlikely, but so necessary. In the morning, after a restless night, Alana told Emma everything. The girl stared in wonder at the open social media pages, taking in the unknown details that seemed strangely familiar. I think I remember these places. Or rather, not like that. I don't remember, but I dream about something like this house sometimes. Unsure, of course. Maybe just something similar, Emma pondered. Her remark about everyone having a double added a mystical tinge to the story. When Nikita flew in, the tension reached a climax. His interest in the details of Emma's fate, his desire to know every detail of how Alana had found the girl, had filled the meeting in the cafe with a sense of foregone conclusion. Nikita was completely different from Emma, tall, trim, with blue eyes and blonde hair. His appearance was not associated with the dark-haired, brown-eyed girl. What had happened during this encounter? Could Nikita have shed light on the unusual resemblance between Sonia and Emma? Is there some deep, hitherto unknown connection behind it? The questions were many, and the answers were bound to follow. The world Alana and Emma were entering promised to be filled with new discoveries, and perhaps changes that would change their lives for the better once and for all. And yet the attentive Alana noticed the similarities, the dimple in Nikita's cheeks when he smiled, and his eyes. The man nodded in the exact same way. Even his nose seemed to wrinkle in the same way. It turned out that Nikita knew English. He had worked for a long time with English developers and had learned the language. Of course, the man confused words and cases and spoke with a strong accent, but Alana understood him perfectly. This is just an incredible story, Nikita pronounced as they settled at a corner table. I couldn't believe my eyes at first when I saw your daughter's picture. What a blessing that you wrote to me. Alana nodded. She wasn't sure she had done the right thing. It seemed to her that her life was taking another turn. Things were about to change abruptly again, and not for the better. She felt like she might lose Emma. The feeling was strong, and of course she already guessed that Emma was no stranger to this man. Nikita made a pleasant impression. He was handsome, polite, energetic, and very friendly. Alana almost physically felt the warmth emanating from him. There was nothing repulsive or suspicious about him to fear or antipathy. And then he told his story. Alana caught every word greedily. A lot of things fell into place now. The puzzle was coming together, but what to do next? Jonathan was a talented programmer. After high school, he moved to Moscow, where he first attended university and then got a job. He bought a house, married the beautiful Maria. His career was going uphill. The young talented programmer was entrusted with complex projects, and one day he got into a team that cooperated with developers from America. They all worked together on a grandiose international project. In his personal life, Nikita also had everything going as well as possible. The young family was born at once 2 twin girls. Nikita and his wife Maria were happy, healthy, beautiful daughters, financial prosperity, love and mutual understanding between spouses. What more could one wish for? When little girls Sonia and Kira were 2 years old, Nikita was sent on a business trip to California. It was necessary to solve several work issues, a matter of a few hours a day. The man still had a lot of time left to get acquainted with this beautiful city. So I made the huge mistake of asking Maria and the girls to come with me, he recalls. That trip was supposed to be an exciting journey, but it turned out to be a real nightmare for our family. At first, everything was going just fine. Nikita would drive 2 or 3 hours to the office in the morning, and then spend the entire day with his family walking around California. They visited the zoo and gallery together, walked around the center. True, having 2 young children meant more than just doting, joy and happiness. Both young parents were tired, which was probably what caused them to let their guard down. It happened in a huge, beautiful park with fountains, wide, flat paths and playgrounds. There were a lot of people in the park that sunny day, no surprise, since the weather was great and the weekend was ahead. Parents seemed to have decided to take their children out for a walk. Nikita was holding Sonia's hand and thought that his wife was also holding Kira's hand. But Maria and his daughter disappeared from his sight for a while. The sea of people had swept them in different directions. Kira had always been more curious and energetic than Sonia, always running somewhere, climbing. Maria was better at handling her. I thought Kira was dragging her wife off to find adventure again. It happened so often. I wasn't worried at all, Nikita continued. 5 or 6 minutes passed, no more. When Nikita finally saw Maria, she was standing at the monument, looking around for her family. Seeing Nikita, the woman smiled and rushed towards him. She was alone, without Kira. Nikita tensed, of course, but didn't panic yet because, well, little else, maybe Kira stayed on the swings or goes like a tail behind her mother's back and just can't be seen. "Where's Kira?" she asked anxiously, looking at her husband. And then Nikita realized everything and jumped up in horror. Maria thought that Kira was with him, and he thought that the daughter had stayed with his wife. The little girl was lost, and it had been about 7 minutes, if not more. How do we find her in this huge park with so many people? What to do? These questions instantly filled his head. Nikita immediately called the police. The call was responded to lightning fast, because it was about the disappearance of a small child. An outfit arrived at the park. At first, everyone hoped that the girl quickly found just lost, just wandering somewhere along the paths, admiring the surroundings, studying the world. It was quite in the character of Kira. But the little girl, as if in the water, rolled into the water. It soon became clear that something had happened to her. We had to return home after a month, Nikita continued. We left with nothing. We didn't know where our little girl was or what had happened to her. It was horrible. We can't even find words to describe our condition with Maria. We couldn't find a place to sleep. We couldn't sleep. We couldn't sleep. We didn't eat anything, and we blamed each other. He told how he was constantly in touch with law enforcement, even hiring private detectives. They worked on the case too, but not a single lead. As the years passed, there was little hope of finding Kira. Sonia grew from a little girl into a beautiful young woman. Looking at her, Maria and Nikita could only imagine what their Kira looked like now. Maria always felt that Kira was alive. Nikita shook her head. She didn't doubt it, and she was right, Alana pronounced. Emma is Kira. There could be no doubt about that. Then, years ago, the little girl was taken from the park. The girl was probably too young to pronounce her name correctly. And the people who took her decided her name was Emma, not Kira. Well, or they just called her their own name. Emma didn't remember anything. She was just a little girl, barely 2 years old. She gradually got used to the new mommy and daddy and learned the language. Their goal, apparently, was to make her not just a well-behaved child, but a full-fledged member of society. It was probably for this purpose that the girl was taken away. But then something went wrong. Emma's mother died, and the father, perhaps having found another way to earn money, realized that the girl no longer interested him. So he brought her to the train station, far from the city, where he left her mercilessly. Then Emma was found by Alana. All this time in Moscow, the girl's real parents found no place for themselves. They of course had to learn to live with this loss, but I know I could not. I didn't even want to imagine what Maria and Nikita had endured, to know nothing about the fate of their own child. Yeah, it would drive you crazy, Alana thought. Especially they may have been saved by the fact that they still had another daughter, Sonia. She was the one they were holding on to. And then I get this letter from you, Alana. And I see a picture of Emma. I'm sure your Emma is Kira. I haven't told my wife anything yet. I need to check it out first, do a DNA test to be sure. If there is a mistake, Maria is unlikely to stand for it. Nikita continued. There was no mistake, of course. The analysis confirmed Emma and Nikita's parentage. I honestly told everything to my daughter. The woman was naturally worried. Everyone realized that now that Emma's birth family had been found, Alana would be alone again. How am I supposed to live without my daughter now? How do I tear her from my heart? Alana agonized. But I have to do it. Emma is not my property. It is important that she lives with her blood relatives. With them, she will get more than I can offer. A brilliant future indeed awaits her with them. And so I watch as Emma begins to socialize with Nikita. You can immediately sense a kindred spirit in their interactions. Emma spoke to her father as if the years of separation had never happened. They laughed at the same jokes, discussed programming languages, argued over solving complex Olympiad problems, understood each other with half a word, even with half a look. I immediately realized that Emma was 100% Daddy's daughter. The woman wasn't jealous. No, she was happy for the girl. Emma's going to be really happy now. The paperwork took a while to finalize. Emma continued to live with Alana. Nikita preferred to stay in a hotel so as not to embarrass the hostess. They saw each other every day, walked, talked, discussed the future. Emma is leaving with her father. It was already a settled matter. The girl looked forward to seeing her mother and especially her sister Sonia. She was a little worried, but she lived the days before departure in joyful anticipation. After all, the girl would soon have a whole new life. But it was hard for Emma to part with Alana, the man who had raised her. How will I be without you? The girl sighed in the evenings. I don't know what's happening to me. I seem to want to leave as soon as possible, to see how things work there, to meet my mother and sister. But I won't be happy without you. We'll get used to it, Alana smiled. And then, we'll see each other. I'll fly to visit you and you'll visit me here sometimes. Oh, and Skype's still on too. It's not like that, you realize that. Of course, Alana understood. She tried her best not to show Emma her sadness. Alana was used to having such a sweet little girl in her life. She had raised her, considered her a daughter, but that didn't give her the right to make Emma her property. Alana had made the decision that was most favorable to Emma, and now she had no doubt that she'd done the right thing. And then Emma and Nikita flew away. A cold emptiness appeared in Alana's soul at the same moment. Yes, once again a woman was starting a new life, and it would take some getting used to. Emma wrote and called often. She quickly learned the language and made friends. In fact, Alana had no doubt that she would. Emma talked about how much fun she was having in the new place, but she always ended the conversation by saying how much she missed Alana. If only she knew how much Alana missed her. A few months passed and New Year's Eve came. This time Alana decided not to decorate the tree. She always did it for Emma. Why would she do it now? Alana was spending the holiday alone. She'd been invited to a party, but she declined. She wasn't in the mood right now. She wanted peace, quiet, comfort. She wanted to sit quietly, watch the New Year's program on TV and think about her own thoughts. Just at that moment there was a signal that someone wanted to chat with Alana on Skype. The woman smiled. It was Emma, of course. There was no one else. Indeed, a smiling, sweet face appeared on the screen. Emma's eyes were shining, as always. Sonia loomed over her shoulder. Alana still couldn't get used to the fact that the sisters looked so much alike. They had become inseparable since their reunion. Emma wished Alana a happy new year, wished her happiness and good luck, told her again that she missed her, and then said that Nikita wanted to talk to her. Alana wasn't surprised. She often talked to both him and Maria. They told her about how things were going with Emma and constantly thanked her for saving their baby girl. Nikita probably wants to wish her a happy new year. There's nothing special about it. But from Nikita's face, Alana somehow immediately guessed that her life was kind of ready to take another sharp turn. The man looked too serious and determined. The woman's stomach even churned with an incomprehensible premonition. Nikita actually wished her a happy new year. And then, "Kira misses you very much." "Very much," he said, looking into Alana's eyes. "She has everything to be happy, but she's still not completely happy. She misses you," Nikita began. "Maria and I thought it would pass. We could just call each other, visit each other. But you two seem to have formed a strong bond. Kira, it literally splits in two. One part is reaching across the ocean to you, and the other part wants to stay with us. The children's doctor said it's very dangerous to her health." So then Nikita made Alana an offer she just couldn't refuse. It turns out that not far from them sold a few years ago a small house with a plot of land. And Nikita bought it, counting on the fact that Sonia, having lost one of their daughters, will stay to live with them, even after becoming an adult. So we bought this house, where, according to our plan, adult Sonia was to live with her husband and children. But Sonia and Kira are still just kids. Besides, they both already said they're not going to live in our neighborhood. They both have grandiose plans to conquer the world. And our cozy neighborhood is too crowded for them, you see. Anyway, the house was idle. "We're asking you to move in," Nikita finished. Alana looked at Nikita in silence. She didn't even know what to say. His words were too good to be true. Is she really going to live next to Emma? Yes, she'll have to get used to everything new, learn the language. But that doesn't matter. If Alana gets a chance to talk to her girl every day. There are jobs for you here. A lot of families need a nanny. You have experience. Besides, there are a lot of restaurants here that are always in need of kitchen helpers. Kira said you're the one for the job, Nikita continued. So are you going to take it? There's nothing keeping you in your town. And this way you'll be close to Kira. The girl is very attracted to you. She needs you, and we need you. Maria and I also want to do something good for the man who saved our daughter. We're one family. Now the house sits idle for nothing anyway. You'll take care of it too, so you'll help us a lot. So what do you think of my offer? Nikita looked at Alana hopefully and waited for an answer. She probably should have said that she needed to think about it, to weigh the pros and cons. But why? After all, the decision had already taken shape in her head. This was just great news. Of course I agree, Alana said without a shadow of a doubt. Her answer was full of determination and joy. The prospect of living near Emma and becoming even closer to the family that had welcomed her so warmly seemed like a marvelous opportunity. It wasn't just an offer to move in. It was a chance to start a new life where she would not only take care of the house, but also help with Emma's upbringing, support her, and be there to experience all the important moments of her life. Nikita smiled back, feeling relieved and happy about her decision. That's wonderful, Alana. We're so excited to have you become a part of our life here on a permanent basis. Kira will be thrilled. It was a new beginning for Alana, full of promise and opportunity. A new page in her life was opening before her, filled with family warmth, new challenges, and most importantly, the happiness of being close to those she loves.